Mr. Chair, you're
All right, we're now live streamed. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Commission virtual public meeting for Thursday, January 6, 2022, the first one of the new year. Call this meeting to order. Roll call, please, Kim.
Sorry, trouble with the mute button. All right, Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Waldman,
here.
Mr. Imes,
Here.
Mr. Pline,
Present.
and I don't think we're expecting Ms. Butler.
That is correct. Ms. Butler is out with COVID symptoms and not able to stay awake for the meeting this evening, she said. So we were missing her. All right, as the agenda is written, any needs for change, anyone? I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Have a second? Although, any further discussion?
Well, is there going to be a presentation on this, or is there, are we going to open the public hearing or not open it until next meeting? What's the process here?
You're talking about item 2 or 1?
Item
It's
1.
kind of go ahead from the city, Tom. It's supposed to be a quick presentation.
We haven't approved the agenda yet. We haven't voted on that yet, have we?
Okay.
I mean, he's wondering though, but that's a valid question, I think, to approve the agenda. So, do you need that to approve the agenda, Bob?
I'm just wondering how we're going to handle it tonight. Because I haven't seen anything, or I have no idea what this is.
Right, it'd be presentation. All right, we'll.
Mr. Bob's question. My understanding is that Mayor Buckley and the city manager, Mr. Jarrell, are going to do the presentation on item 1.
Okay.
There you go.
And then we'll hold the public hearing next meeting.
You can have the public hearing tonight if you so choose.
We can start it, but we still have to give a chance for other people
Regulations
to.
of legislation, and we normally do. I don't know that we have any public testimony on this.
It still has to be open until the next week.
It's right. Do understand
Right,
that.
we should open the public hearing tonight, and as you said, I don't think that here's anybody to testify, but keep it open until next time, and
That is the
if anybody
plan.
shows up. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That is the plan. All right,
Okay.
everybody in agreement with the agenda, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the agenda passes as written. And therefore, we will move right on into the approval of minutes. Everyone was sent the minutes via email. Any issues with those? I had no issues.
I had no issues. I move to approve them.
I'll second that.
Second.
Any discussion? All
I
those in favor
wasn't
of the
here.
minutes?
So I'm gonna be abstaining because I wasn't there.
Let's mute Dave. I think that might have been you. Talk again, Dave.
I will not be voting. I wasn't at the meeting, although I have listened to it watched it on YouTube.
That's fine because you have a fantastic Christmas sweater on, so that's wonderful.
You haven't even seen my llama.
All right, you don't need to stand up. That's oh, we like to keep it light here. Okay, all those in favor of the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? And we have an abstention from the llama at the bottom. Thank you very much, Dave. That was interesting. That's okay. Moving on now to
right.
the public hearings for ordinance O, TAC 40, TAC 21, the capital budget and capital improvement program, the 100% electric mobility plan for the purpose of adding the 100% electric Annapolis mobility plan to include electric vehicles, boat, associated support infrastructure to the fiscal year 2022. That's this year, capital budget and capital improvement program. And we have here some fantastic presenters, Mr. David Jarrell running the city, as well as Mayor Gavin Buckley. And I'll turn it over to you guys for a presentation. And then after that, questions by commissioners, and then any public comment if we have.
You want to start out, Dave?
I'm going to stop share for you guys.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, great. Well, it's an honor to be here. I want to say a big thank you and a happy new year to you guys, because I know you do tireless work for the city that I don't think people appreciate the amount of hours that you all put into this. So a big
Very
thank
true.
you and looking forward to an exciting 2020 with you. With the Hillman Garage coming down, we see this as a great opportunity for the city. It will be a temporary discomfort, of course. Always good things do come with those sorts of things, but it presents a lot of opportunity here. And one of the opportunities is to reimagine our transportation internally. We think that when we move people from the Hillman Garage and have to move people around the city to different parking assets, we have an opportunity to do it differently. I've always said that Annapolis has more of a walk-in problem than a parking problem. We have a lot of parking assets. We have just conditioned the public to think they can come and park on the waterfront in Annapolis. And then when that hasn't happened, there are the reasons we see the kind of gridlock we see on the Eastport Bridge and Gate 1 of the Academy. So moving city employees, moving different people and getting people out of their cars as quickly as they can is the opportunity that's in front of us. And the opportunity that's in front of us, we should seize, because this is a chance to electrify our internal transportation. Now, we still have to work with the county to electrify our cross-jurisdictional transportation. But right now, there's an opportunity in front of us that we have a lot of support in the City Council for. The mobility plan for the garages, while the garage is under construction, we're calling the 100% mobility plan, electric plan. And that plan involves two main types of transportation and then a couple of other options. The two main ones are trying to electrify the circulator and increase its routes and create an efficiency that it hasn't seemed to be able to achieve until now. And that would basically be the type of vehicles you might have seen in Quebec or some of those Canadian electric, 100% electric buses. The beauty of that route and that bus system is that because it only does short runs, mile or 2 or 3 mile runs, that it can last an entire day without having to be recharged. So we could get a vehicle that could move people around the city and not have to have 2 vehicles to complete those routes. And then within that route, we want to also do a thing called a 10-minute trolley. And these are basically the electric golf carts that you've seen, 6 or 8 people golf carts that do miniature loops, and they use secondary roads. So they don't have to deal with getting caught up on Main Street or West Street or some of the busiest streets of the city, Prince George Street, because they can predominantly use secondary roads because they're smaller, and we've designed it in such a way that they only come onto major arteries when they have to. So the 10-minute trolley will be another efficient internal route that we're doing. We also hope to potentially use that in Eastport as well, and try to get people to park maybe at the Eastport Shopping Centre and then come onto the peninsula on a trolley, on a 10-minute trolley, and get dropped off at 5th Street, which we see as being a transportation hub. And at 5th Street is where we want to prototype the first, what we believe will be 100% electric ferry that you can walk onto, but you can also roll onto with your bike. It can cater up to 8 bikes and 10 people. It will just be one route as the prototype. The route will go from 5th Street to Prince George Street and back. And that's all it will do. So it won't be an on-demand type of transportation, but it will be a dedicated route, which we think will itself become a tourist attraction. But what it does do is get people to a second set of parking assets. That is a city marina, which we've just done some negotiations with to getting some parking capacity. It gets it to the school grounds of the Eastport Elementary School, if that was to be used in the summer. And then it also gets to where we believe where we are going to do a transportation hub where there'll be charging stations for the 10-minute trolleys, and also the first, we believe, in-water charging station for the first 100% electric ferry. So the three options are the ferry, the 10-minute trolley, and the circulator. There also are other things that we're working on, an on-demand system that will involve some other type of electric vehicles and obviously an app system as well. What we truly believe is that there is money coming down to us, from our federal partners throughout the country. And the people that are going to get the money are the people that have a plan. This plan can be implemented in 2022. And so it's an achievable goal, but you have to have a plan, I think, before you get taken seriously. So this plan will mean that we get people out of their cars as soon as we can when they come into the city. Imagine if you're not driving that last quarter of a mile to get into the city. Imagine if you're getting out of your car on the way to your job at City Hall and you don't do that last quarter or 10th of a mile. That reduction from 2 million tourists or from 2 or 3 or 400 employees a year is a huge benefit to decarbonizing the city. So this is our plan. It's not a huge ask, around the $1 million number. We have approached our state partners and also our county partners with contributions to this. We're working on a partnership as well with BG&E. It'll be part of an all-inclusive or a comprehensive plan that the city is working on called the AMP plan, which stands for Annapolis Alternative Mobility Plan. But this is just one piece of it. It's an exciting piece. It'll make this city a leader. And we are asking for you guys to get behind this plan and go 100% electric with us. Thank you all.
So I'll jump in a little bit to talk about the mechanics of how we're going to do this. We're doing this as an amendment to the current CIP, the FY22 CIP, mostly because the electric boat is a long lead time item. So we really want to get that on order as we start the planning and design and then acquisition of the other assets that are going to be required. So for this current fiscal year, we've got $100,000 for planning and conceptual design and cost estimating. We're going to have the electrical infrastructure that the mayor was talking about. So the plan for that will be included, but we also need to improve the docking over on the 5th Street side if we're going to be docking the electric boat. It can pull up now, but it's not optimal. So we need to improve that. So we've got $100,000 to start the planning and conceptual design for that. We'll do a lot of public outreach to get input on what that's going to look like. And then $330,000 to start the acquisition for the electric boat. Next year, we will, in FY23, we envision that we'll be buying the small electric carts that the mayor was talking about, and also an electric circulator. So that's the $1 million that we have set up there. For FY24, it's all TBD because it's the detailed design and construction part of the infrastructure project, and we really don't know at this point what those costs are going to be. So we just plugged in TBD. Those will be refined as we hire an engineering firm to do the planning and do some of the initial design and cost estimating with the money that's will be in this year's budget. So we'll have a better idea going forward in future CIPs for those improvements that are going to be required. So that's what this legislation is really all about. It's an amendment to the FY22 CIP to get some money in this year to get this project started, and then additional money in 23 and 24 to buy the additional assets and to do the infrastructure improvements. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, for the financial part of it, how much of that is city money versus the grants that we're getting? How much is the city looking at overall for this project?
You know, our goal is to get it covered 100% by grants, right? We think that the people who have a green plan will be the first people who are eligible. Our goal is to have, you know, something that looks so shovel ready. Even if we don't buy some of the electric vehicles in 2022, we still can lease we can do an arrangement with the already guy that has the electric trolleys. We've already talked to him. But we believe we can get the ferry operating this year. And that's why we need to sort of put a deposit down on it. But
And
part of it,
awesome.
I've asked the county for 200 to 300 of it. We've asked the state for 100. Senator Elfreth is pushing for 100 for it. We might be able to bump that number up. I'm chasing BG&E for about $250,000, and then we think the rest could get wrapped up in federal money. So we know a great mayor that's in head of transportation in Pete Buttigieg. He is obviously sympathetic to mayors around the country who have the same sort of thinking as his. So we think we're going to be a good candidate for some of that federal money. So I'm hoping to get it all covered, but we have to obviously put in the budget as our own.
And my second question would be, any thoughts for making it a contractor for the boat and operating that? Because we already have a ferry service, but as you know, it's diesel and it's not too environmentally friendly.
Yeah, Ben, so we've already met with Debbie Goslin. She's interested in being our operator for this. She's also interested in electrifying her fleet as well. So if we can do this all together, where she would be operating an electric taxi service and the other things that she does, as well as this ferry service, it would really be a great fit.
And is the ferry free to the public?
Yeah,
That's our
and
plan.
that's what I truly believe, Ben, about public transportation, that there's a stigma attached to it in America. You have to make transportation initially, you have to make it free, I think. You have to make it fun. You have to make it part of the experience. So, plenty of people are going to be able to get on that free ferry with their kids and their bikes, come from Eastport to the historic district, or go from the historic district across to Eastport and maybe go out to the Maritime Museum or some of the other assets in Eastport. And so, but making it part of the experience is what's great. And what's great about this company, and it's something that Stuart Pittman and I are talking about, is trying to lure this Swedish company to come to Annapolis and do their production. Our dream would be if they set up some kind of production facility at the David Taylor redevelopment, and that we could attach their green credibility to the city of Annapolis. We're on the forefront of a lot of environmental things, and we don't really talk about it enough. And I think we have, high standards here. We obviously have the largest solar park on a brownfield in America that no one knows about, out at Waterworks Park. We have, obviously massively high standards on 1.1 trees, on stormwater and all that stuff. We're holding people to high standards, and we want this to be part of our identity. We truly believe that that green tourism and that is a big thing as well. That's in the future. And if people come here, get out of their car as quick as possible, or walk, or ride bikes, or get on electric ferries or electric trolleys, they'll feel like they're doing something good.
I understand the circulator part of it, both the current and the future plans, and I understand the ferry part of it, both the current and the future plans. It's that middle one. It's these shuttle carts that I wonder about. And it sounds like you're thinking in two phases. And by the way, I want to congratulate both of you guys for thinking, into the future. It's not easy, and I think there's an opportunity here, and you're seizing it. Good. But nonetheless, a word of caution. What's going on with these shuttle carts? I mean, are you going to be leasing them? Are you going to be paying this outfit to run people around? What's the arrangement? Because I'm not so sure about the quality of their fleet.
Yeah, so
just keep that in your back pocket.
Let me just tell you the route really quickly. Calvert Street. So Calvert Street. So Calvert Street, where People's Park is. Do you know that location?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be another transportation hub where we would establish charging stations for golf carts. We understand that the quality of the fleet needs upgrading, but in the short term, we could use it until we get to that upgrade point. And the reason we choose that street, Calvert Street, as a transportation hub is because there is the Hillman Garage. Sorry, not the Hillman. There is the Gotts Garage. There's the State Garage. next to St. John's, and then there's also the county garage. So 3 parking assets, and then and it intersects the main artery into the city. So if we could be flagging people down at that point and getting them into transportation, getting them into a free state garage on the weekend or every night of the week, or getting them into one of the other 2 parking assets and getting them onto a trolley, and then that trolley goes down past St. John's, onto State Circle, down, I forgot the street, the one next to Pinckney Street. So it goes on a secondary road.
Cornhill.
Cornhill. And then, so it goes on a secondary road, and then I'm hoping to cut through an alley and come back up onto Main Street. So the only time it will really be in an area where it can get clogged up, and that's what happens to the circulator. The circulator, with all its good intentions, can get stuck in traffic when it's getting down to the waterfront, right? You see that happening all the time. On Compromise and on Main Street and that.
But
So
let me get back to my question. I understand, what's the deal with this, with the shuttle cart people? I mean, are we buying, is the city buying, is that part of this proposal?
Yeah, so
Is
It
it
is, Bob. So in FY20, next year, FY23, we're going to buy both an electric circulator and 2 of the 6-passenger vans. So we're going to buy higher quality so they can actually be winterized and used year round. Right now, you know, the ones that you see driving around town are marginally acceptable in the wintertime. They just have the plastic flaps. The ones that we plan to buy could be actually winterized and used all year round.
So in the interim, are you hiring these people to do this, or what are we doing?
that's the plan. Yeah.
To hire them to use their fleet?
Yes.
Okay.
And to also brand them as well. So we need to brand the circulator when we get it. It has to be branded, right? And we need to brand the golf carts so they look specific to the 100% electric plan, and also brand the ferry. So in the short term, we'll do some kind of monthly arrangement, you know, that works for the city. As long as we stay under the budget that we've allotted, we can work it out. And then we work to the long-term plan of upgraded, more efficient, and a bit less wear and tear, torn.
Okay.
Vehicles, you know.
All right.
Well,
Mhm.
I have to say that, you know, the shuttle carts are the one, probably the thing that's I'm most interested in. But I think with anything that we do, really, it's just communicating what it is to people, and really any kind of proposal you get from people has to have a communications plan inside. I mean, I thought the circulator was dead. Because I've been waiting downtown for the circulator in December. I thought you just stopped doing it for COVID because I hadn't seen it forever. So I didn't really think you were even still running it again. And then I see these little carts going around. I'm not sure where they start and where they begin, but I think having a Calvert Street at such a visible place is not just because it's close to the parking garages, but it's such a visible open space. I think that's great. And I'm excited about the ferries because I've gone to different countries and been on the ferry, and it's fun. And it'll be fun for people to do. So I think it's great. And I'm really looking forward to it. But really letting people understand how it works is going to be the biggest challenge, I think.
I think you're spot on with that, David, because that's why we've hired a marketing firm just for that. And we did a presentation at Maryland Hall the other day. And I would love to send it to you all because he really did nail it down about, you know, making the garage replacement a really positive thing. Not the garage is not coming down, it's going up, you know, and it's going to be state of the art, and it's going to have solar panels, and it's going to have stormwater controls, and it's going to have extra parking for us, you know, and it's going to be connected to transportation and have smart technology. So you know how many spaces are out there when you're coming into the city. So it's a very exciting presentation, and I'll send it to you all. So when you guys have some spare time, you could take a look at it.
Great.
So this is, you done, David, or?
Yeah, I'm done. I'm
So this is really part of the mobility plan that we've seen, you know, related to the presentations for the Hillman Garage. I'm just having a little trouble sort of piecing these puzzle pieces together. Is that the way to think about that?
Yeah. So the garage, we always knew we had to get people to different parking assets throughout the city. We have a lot of parking assets, and many of them are unutilized, and we we believe Eastport is an option because we've just done some new rezoning for the Maritime Museum. We've done some, some negotiations with the City Marina, which is a parking asset that's right there. Also, I want to, work on a plan. I see the solution to the traffic problem in the Eastport Peninsula has to be some kind of arrangements with the shopping centre. I want to start those negotiations because we need to get people off the peninsula. We need to get them out of their cars as quick as possible. So it's all part. So the impetus or the main driver for this is, taking the opportunity of the replacement of the garage to reimagine our transportation and think of it differdifferently.
Right.
Yeah, Alex, Alex,
The
this is gonna
presentation
be
that you
kind-
mentioned the other day at Maryland Hall was part of this plan that's connected to the garage, basically. Okay. What were you saying, David?
Has there been any discussion about, I'm sorry, go ahead. You were asking.
Yeah,
David
I
something.
was just going to say, this is sort of a three-phase project. The first phase will be the downtown trolley, because that's going to be implemented when the garage comes down, which, is just a couple of months from now. The boat's going to take a while to get here. It's an 18-month delivery time. So as soon as that gets here, then that will be phase 2, and we'll set up the trolley.
Connections, Dave. Unless you have some Swedish connections, I might be able to get his.
And how big is the boat, passenger-wise?
It's 11, 12 people. So skipper. There's another aspect to it. I'm sorry, Dave, I cut you off, but it's 12, and then you can fit 8 bikes as well. Yeah.
And where is it going to go, real quick, on the map? I'm going to show the map there.
Yeah.
See the map?
Yes. So what it's going to give us the ability to do is to bypass the bridge. So when the bridge is packed on a weekend, you could just walk to the 5th Street ferry and get on, and then bypass the bridge, and then you get dropped off at the Burtis House or at Prince George Street.
Right here.
One direct route. It's just, and so, you could almost do that route. You could probably do that nearly 4 times an hour. It'd be tight to do it 4 times an hour, but at least 3 times an hour if we wanted to. So it depends on, how we structure that. That's still being worked out. But just
That's an awesome route.
And if you look at the conditions of 5th Street, it definitely needs some upgrading, but it could be beautiful. And and I think when we've taken our Senator Elfrith out on it, we've taken our BG&E partners out on it. We took different stakeholders on the trip just to sort of see what it's like. It's so nice to be on a boat, and it's a center console style of boat, but you can't. There's no smoke. There's no noise. You can talk to one another. It really is a great thing. And, we have a lot of boats in the city, and we have to start thinking about that if we really, be moving in this direction of, less fossil fuel dependency. And you guys, I can't wait to take you all for the first run on it, because it really is an impressive boat. And it only is going to be 6 knots, but we took it out on the Severn, and you punch that thing and it planes in about 2 seconds. It's awesome.
You might hate me for saying this, or a lot of people might hate me for saying this, but I'd want to see the ferry actually be a little bigger, because it's going to be such a popular item. I mean, I would want to go there with all of my kids. People are going to want to go to Eastport and see it. Is there any way to get it bigger, or get maybe 2 ferries? I guess eventually maybe 2.
Yeah, I think that is what we're going to grow into, because, the county executive is very keen on that. And we want to, when we've learned the ropes and when we get sort of used to a system, then we can start to consider going to Back Creek, or maybe going to College Creek or Weems Creek or something like that, or maybe going across to the David Taylor Center. And then, the work we're doing with the National Park System, we're trying to connect all of our assets and model our greenway system on the San Francisco model, the Bay Bridge Parks program. So that the greenway between San Francisco and the Bay Bridge is an amazing thing to do when you're in that part of the country. We have the potential to do that here, to connect, Greenbury Point and other different green assets that get us all the way out. That's why we fought for that other piece of land that has been controversial lately on the other side of the bridge, that is in the hands of the Chesapeake Bay Trust, you know. Chesapeake.
And one more thing, we always get asked, you know, what is the city going to take on as a recurring basis of cost in the future? What do we see this doing, and how do we fund that in the future?
So Dave will speak to it a little bit, and I'm sorry I'm cutting you off, Dave.
For operating.
Yeah. We're working with the School of Seamanship that is based in the city marina, and they see the potential to have captains log hours on this. Also see potential for training young people to get into that kind of industry as well. So it works out well. So there'll be some good scholarships available for kids to sort of learn that as a trade. But the School of Seamanship is right there in that building. So they're the initial people we talk to as a way to cover the costs. I see when restaurants are paying into a fund because they are giving up their parking spaces potentially on site, or when they're leasing a parking space from the city, that money should go into a fund, into a transportation fund, and that transportation fund could be the operating money that we need to run some of these assets, right? So, you know, so we are actually going to be getting some revenue that we wouldn't be getting. Say, let's just take the boatyard, for instance. If the boatyard decided, and we came up with a plan that they wanted, everybody loved the outdoor seating there and didn't want it to go away. So we're going to fight to bring that back. But at the same time, they should be paying the city some money because they're displacing parking. But that displaced parking could be operation money for a transportation system that gets people to other parking assets.
I think that's the key part, Mayor, is this is going to become part of our transit system. So, you know, there's federal money and there's state money available for transit systems, you know, to the tune of about 90% of the operating costs. So it will become part of our transit system and get funding in that way as well.
And we will be able to say that if you get on any transportation that only operates within city boundaries, that you are doing it and you're not burning any fossil fuel directly. Of course, you know, there's going to be the questions about the power source. Of course, that question is something that we still have to answer as a country and as a planet, right? But you'll be able to say that you just got around the city either on an electric ferry or electric trolley or electric circulator, or you got an electric bike and stuff like that. And that's what we're trying to make a statement about who we are as a city, that is a priority for us.
Okay, so I have a quick question. Without going into, I don't know how much of the down and dirty you've gotten with some of these plans, but you talked about restaurants, for example. Are there any ideas with these different assets of running some of them in the evening at all? Has that been, or is it just going to be a daytime thing? Because I know like the circulator stops at what, 11? Has there been any talk about running things later for the restaurants and for the downtown evening crowd, especially in the summer?
I think 11 had cut off we were looking at, but there's definitely something we can visit, you know.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was different things for the different assets, like maybe you'd run the circulator later or the ferry or the little electric cars at different times. Because I know that a lot of people who park downtown in the evening are the restaurant workers. They're taking up a lot of the parking spaces.
Yeah.
Especially if they're not being charged after 7:30.
Yeah,
so
we're working on a plan for that. But there also is the on-demand thing that we're working on that might have that potential to do exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, Bob. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Putting the ferry dock at the foot of Prince George Street is, I think, yet another argument in favor of enlivening Prince George Street. And if there's ever a hotel built at the foot down there, is that the vehicular access should be off of Prince George Street and not in a park, not on the Campbell Park. And having all of that stuff happen down there is a good sign. You know what I mean? Prince George Street could be enlivened, that whole 2-block area. Anyway, that's for another day and another topic. I think it's great. I remember Ellen Moyer once had an idea that she got the taxi drivers together and they agreed that they would take restaurant employees late at night out to the stadium and drop them off for a guaranteed price. And the employees thought it was a great idea. The taxi drivers thought it was a great idea. And they would stand there, wait until the people's cars started and everything was fine and they could drive off. Might explore them and give them some of the, some of this. It might be a good thing for the taxi drivers in town. All right, enough. So I've had my questions answered.
On that Ego Alley, all the way to the end.
So, I like that. I think the idea is just so that they can't get caught up, so make it efficient, and that's the reliability plan is the piece that's been missing in the circulator. We've all tried to catch that circulator, and then you go, oh, maybe I'll walk 1 block. And then you end up walking 2 blocks. And just as you're about to open the door at your destination, the circulator goes by you. So we have to make sure that when we do this, it is 100% efficient and people can rely on it. And so, that's why even if the circulator got caught in traffic, you'd be able to get on a 10-minute trolley. And then that they can continually do these 10-minute loops,
Oh, all right, wait.
Awesome. I'd love to see a bigger
Congratulations.
boat though, or more of them.
Right.
Me
Well, let's
too.
hear what public comment is.
We do have a public comment. So is there anything left from commissioners and our presenters? Okay, we had public comment sent in. I can open up those files. Do we have anybody online actually to talk tonight?
We do not, I believe.
Okay, well, what I can do is show the one letter from the Esports Civic Association that we got in regards to this, and I'll display it. Let me stop sharing this screen. Everybody take a quick 20-second coffee break while I open up some files, and we'll get this going.
Just while we're waiting, there's one thing that I'd really be interested to know more is how does this dovetail into the rest of the transit system, both from a system perspective and a financial perspective, given that, the transit system is difficult to fund, and certainly with some of the changes in how parking revenue is going to work, that's going to put a little bit more stress on the rest of the transit system. So I'm just a little uncomfortable with how all this would mesh together.
Yeah, Alex, we need to work obviously through a lot of those details, but my point was, by being part of the transit system, there would be federal money that would be flowing in to cover at least a large portion of the cost, if not all of it. Because if the city had to cover the entire cost of this operation, it would be very expensive and very difficult to sustain. But if we can make it part of the transit system and can get some federal funding for the operations and maintenance, that will definitely help. So a lot more to explore as far as how that's going to work and how much is going to flow. But that's the concept.
But we definitely, while the garage is down, we have a plan to fund transportation for the couple of years that's a challenge for us. We believe there's other opportunities, such as, the ferry. We can definitely get some sponsorships. We see, the BG&E partnership and the fact that they will be using Annapolis as a kind of a model city for smart technologies and partnerships as another potential grant option for us. So I think, if you've got the ideas out there, and I think, we'll be good candidates for a lot of different other options.
Okay, and if anybody has already read or is reading this, it's a short one-pager from Bill Reichert from the Esports Civic Association. Basically, I'll give you the cliff notes in 8 seconds or less. That they support anything within working with parking in Eastport, and they look forward to working with the city and staff and their little task force to go over this project and make sure it's dovetailing in nicely. It doesn't sound like it necessarily is 100% for, and it doesn't sound like it's any against. It just says, we like the way things are going and we're going to work with you to further develop it. It's kind of what the gist is. And they have one other document they submitted with it. Let you quickly read that, Gavin and the gang, commissioners. That's about it, all you see on the screen.
Yeah, thank you. So at least they didn't shoot it down straight away.
Right, except because you would expect, right? I would expect that, but no, it's not a shoot down for sure. And I'll switch to the.
I just want to say, like, people get so stuck on the, you know, like the idea here is to not want to drive, you know, is to want to walk, to want to bike, to want to not be so auto-centric. And so, you know, this is not like you're coming and parking your car and getting on the ferry and going to work like that, you know, that stuff you see in Sydney Harbour or in Seattle or something like that. This is a recreational one. If you happen to be using that parking assets there for the day, then you have those two parking options. I do think the school is a good option.
Yeah, my only thing I see in the future where we're going to fail is people liking it too much. So you might get people that want to get back to the parking spot, but people just want to go on it for a ride. And therefore I say plus up the side. I mean, I 100% believe this is going to get utilized by everyone who goes down there and sees it. If they see it and know it, I mean, of course you'd want to take a free boat ride.
Yeah.
To Eastport. I would. I know everybody would. It's wonderful, you know.
You're right.
And you
You're
go to
right.
Eastport, get a sandwich over there, and you know, hang out, or go to the restaurant. But it might hinder a lot of people that I want to get back to my parking spot, and all these people are taking my boat ride. There's only 11 people every 20 minutes. So more space. That's all I'm saying. More
All right.
space. And that's all I have. And this is the Eastport parking report that they provided. And that's the only comments that I've received. City, is there anything else?
No.
If you had a lot of time, you could go through the Eastport parking report. That's been provided to us in the past.
I actually read it, and there are a lot
I
of
did too.
solutions in there. There are a lot of solutions, and many of them don't cost anything. One of them is a change in zoning to allow properties with lots to rent their spaces, like churches and so forth. The other thing is to make a deal with City Marina and deal with, because he's got 200 spaces in the lower deck. Anyway, the answers are there. They did a very good job 2 years ago on that report.
And we've made the deal.
I must have had nothing else to do to read that thing.
We've made the deal with City Marina, and we truly believe that it's time for the peninsula to create a parking zone, because you know, I think they haven't wanted to do it, but really because they haven't done it, they haven't forced anyone to think about parking in any creative way.
Yeah.
So if they were forced to come up with some solutions, then they would have built something, or they would have organized some remote parking. But because there has been no pressure to do that, because there's not a parking zone, I think no one's been motivated.
It was good. All right.
We've got a
We got a
walking
lot to do
problem.
tonight. We have Village at Providence Point.
But this is more fun, talking about boats and exciting.
Okay.
I like this.
All right,
I'm a
let's
fan
go.
of boats. All right, well, we've opened it up for public comment. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, commissioners. And we've opened it up for public comment. Hearing is open from now until our next meeting. We got our first piece of public comment from the Eastport Civic Association, Bill Reichert and the gang. Thank you very much. In support with working with the mayor and the city manager and the city staff to come to even more better conclusions, my proper English. So that item is, we will now continue that. Thanks, Dave. We'll continue that to the next meeting. And we can now move on to the next item. Thanks again, everyone, for
Thank
participating.
you guys. Thank you so much.
Thumbs up. More plowing, more plowing. All right, going on to the next item on the agenda. Let me share that with everyone. Here we go. Agenda. Back to what we had the last meeting. There's quite a few people, Julian will probably have to let back in. But moving on to the plan development preliminary subdivision application by National Lutheran Communities and Services, Catholic Properties, et cetera, about the Village at Providence Points on property located at the intersection of Forest Drive and Spa Road. Also, people would know that as the old, well, we'll just continue on. So if we could continue with the presentation, because we're not complete with Alan Hyatt and the rest of the gang giving their full presentation. And commissioners can ask questions as we go. And then after that, we will open up public testimony. And we have quite a bit of public testimony to display, but we'll go with people that are actually able to dial in tonight to give public testimony first. So commissioners, without any other further delay, we will move right on to the presenters continuing their presentation with a lead in from the city if there's anything they need to add before presentation. Tom?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I wanted to make sure that the commissioners received the 3 items that were emailed to them. The first, we had emailed some additional exhibits that came from Mr. Hyatt's office, Exhibit 20, 21, and 22. They get added to the exhibit package that you received for the previous hearing on December 16th. I also emailed to the commissioners the comments letters that have been received since December 16th to today. There were several of those. And there was also an addendum I emailed over to the staff report that added 4 conditions.
Received.
Thank you. I'm happy to turn it over to Mr. Hyatt.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. At the last meeting, you may recall on December 16th, we presented Larry Bradshaw on behalf of National Lutheran, who gave you some background on the continuing care retirement community which is proposed as an institution for care of the aged as is defined in the city code. So you heard about that. We also presented Kevin Johnson, our civil engineer, who went into a fair amount of detail about some of the environmental features on the site, not the least of which was the stormwater management program that you heard about. And then because Mr. Weingrad was unable to testify at a subsequent hearing, you took him out of order as a member of the public, and that's where we concluded. So tonight we will start with Mike Klobasco. He's an environmental consultant, and he's done the forest stand delineation, forest conservation plan. He's going to talk a lot about the forest on the site, as you can imagine. And then, as Mr. Smith indicated, and I think you acknowledged, we did add exhibits 20, 21, and 22. So, I want to make sure that's all part of the record 1 through 22, Mr. Chairman, just for a little housekeeping there.
It is, and Ms. Consoli take that into the record as such.
Yeah, so 20 is a letter to Dr. Nash, 21 is a natural resources inventory, and 22, I hope you will find helpful. When we conclude with Mr. Klobasco, we're going to have Mark Pelusi, who's our landscape architect, site planner, testify, and he will be referring to these plans under section or exhibit 22, which I think will be helpful to give you a perspective of what this proposed project will look like if it's approved. And those are the sorts of things that I'm hoping you find are helpful. So with that, I would call Mr. Klobasco as my next witness. Mr. Klobasco, I see you there. Would you state your name and tell the Planning Commission what you do for an occupation? And then I'm going to, if I could share my screen just for a moment, I will pull up your professional biography. That's under Exhibit 8. Everybody can see that?
Yeah, but can't read it. See it, but can't read it. Don't worry about it.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so go ahead and answer the question. And Mr. Chairman, I don't want to go through the tedious exercise of qualifying these folks as expert witnesses. We've talked about that before, but you did want to get a little background from each of these experts. Is that still the position you have? Well, go ahead, Mr. Klabaska. Go ahead and answer the question.
My name is Mike Labasco. I'm an environmental consultant with Wetland Studies and Solutions, business address 1131 Benfield Boulevard, Suite L, Millersville, Maryland, 21108. I've been involved with this project for almost 8 years now. I'm a professional wetland scientist. I am certified, I'm a qualified professional under the Maryland Forest Conservation Act. I've been doing environmental studies, forest stand delineations, wetland delineation studies throughout Maryland for almost 30 years now.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I would offer Mr. Klabaska as an expert, as an environmental consultant.
Thank you. Please proceed.
All right, thank you. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen because Mr. Klabaska, you're going to share yours next, right?
Correct.
Okay. So as I indicated to the chairman, you were involved in the preparation of the forest stand delineation, the preliminary forest conservation plan, the stream restoration plan, all those sorts of things. And would you take a moment and refer to the appropriate exhibit while you do so, and generally describe the natural features of this site? That would include the slopes and the critical area, the wetlands, all the things that you have identified on your plan.
Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Give a brief overview as I can. Starting with the topography. The topography on the northern half of the site is relatively flat, but becomes more pronounced as you move south towards Crab Creek, which is located in this area here. The entire property and project area itself is located within the Crab Creek watershed, and several wetland areas and unnamed tributaries drain down to Crab Creek. 4 non-tidal wetland pockets are located between the western property line and Crystal Spring Farm Road in this area, the largest of which drains to an intermittent stream through a culvert under Crystal Spring Farm Road and in a southerly direction for about 1,000 feet before it exits the property. There are also 4 other non-tidal wetland pockets located at the northern end of the site, here, and 2 smaller ones here near Forest Drive. The only permanent impacts to any wetlands on site will be the filling of these 2 small pockets totaling less than 3,000 square feet for the construction of Skipper's Lane, which will be coming right through the middle of them across the northern half of the site. There's also a non-tidal wetland at the rear of the property here, designated as a high-quality vernal pool by the Maryland Department of the Environment, but it will not be impacted in any way by this development. The vernal pool is located in a separate drainage area from the project, and no water originating from the project area will ever enter or affect this wetland. It will remain as it is. Unnamed tributaries and adjacent non-tidal wetlands that drain directly to Crab Creek exist in this area here, and another tributary that comes under Spa Road at the southern end drains across the lower part of the site to this location. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Of the overall 175.63 acre project area, 36 acres are located within the Chesapeake Bay critical area. There's a small area, portion of the site in the critical area right here in the lower left-hand corner of my screen. And the remaining critical area is located toward the southern end over in this area that I'm outlining with my pointer. The only proposed disturbance within the critical area is for the restoration of approximately 502 linear feet of severely degraded stream channel in this area flowing from Spa Creek down to Crab Creek, and for the construction of a hiker-biker trail right adjacent to Spa Road in this area here. The section of stream that's proposed to be restored conveys untreated runoff from the existing middle school property on the opposite side of Spa Creek. And the channel itself is deeply incised and has actively eroding banks. The applicant is going above and beyond typical requirements for this project to restore this stream and provide environmental enhancement that will remove a significant amount of sediment that every time it rains gets washed out the eroding banks and deposited into the wetlands and Crab Creek down below. While the stream restoration work will be done carefully, we will do everything that can be done to minimize tree clearing while the work is being done. And then any disturbed areas will be seeded, stabilized, as well as planted with native trees and shrubs. So as a result, the project not only minimizes impacts to resources in the critical area, but also provides a significant environmental enhancement through these stream restoration activities.
You have prepared what we call the FSD, forest stand delineation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Would you explain to the members of the Planning Commission what the FSD depicts in terms of the forest and the priority forest and the quality? All those terminologies sometimes get intermingled, and I'd like you to explain that to them, what we're really looking at here with this FSD.
You got it. Of the 140 acres that are located outside of the critical area in this project, 99 acres are currently forested, and those areas are designated as the light green and blue colors shown throughout this plan. The majority of the forest canopy is dominated by white oak, chestnut oak, southern red oak, and sweet gum. And the remaining open areas are a combination of open fields, such as this area, which is widely referred to as the meadow, as well as existing horse pasture over in this area next to Maskey Farm Road, and other mowed areas further to the south over here. Scattered throughout the property are also 270 significant trees. And you can see them, I'll zoom in a bit, but they're the dots that are widely scattered.
Let me just interrupt you for 1 second. Tell the commission, what's a significant tree? What is that?
A significant tree is defined as a tree 24 inches or greater in the city that is of fair or better health.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Actually, poor, any tree 24 inches or greater. However, you only need a variance if the tree between 24 and 30 inches is in fair or better health. And I'll get into that in a little bit.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Although all of the forest on this site is designated as high priority forest, those sections of the forest containing wetlands, wetland buffers, streams, and stream buffers are considered by city staff as the highest of high priority. The plan on your screen here, which is Exhibit 21, was provided to us by city staff back in June of 2017 to designate the areas that staff deemed were the highest priority, the highest of high priority. And those areas have been highlighted by city staff in yellow and green on this plan. The applicant then used this plan as a guide to revise the prior layout so that the proposed development is now sited almost entirely outside of the highest high priority areas. And if you're looking at this, if you were to overlay the site plan, you would see it fits nicely within the area shown in white here, with just some minor incursions into some of the yellow areas, and also some additional preservation of white areas where we were able to stay out of. Furthermore, to the greatest extent practicable, reforestation for this project has been concentrated in areas that are currently not forested, but are also considered high priority, such as the meadow at the back of the property and some of the existing fields over here by Spa Road. I'd like to point out one item about the meadow at the back of the site. The meadow at the back of the site is artificially created. It's not a natural feature, and it's maintained by regular mowing by the property owner. And if mowing were to stop in this field, the field would become pretty quickly overrun by invasive species such as Bradford pear and autumn olive in about 5 to 7 years or less, and it would no longer be a meadow.
So what are you proposing to replace there, or are you going to get to that?
I'll get to it, but I can answer that quickly. We're going to replace it with a mixed hardwood forest. We're going to plant it with native species, maintain and monitor it so that it develops into a high quality forest to match what else other areas of the site.
Mike, can you go back with one slide just for a moment?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to, pointing to that white area that you mentioned.
Yes.
That's where the proposed facility is to be located, more or less, right? I mean, I just want everybody clear about that.
It very closely mimics that line there. It's been inserted into that white area.
Right. And that's not by accident. That's after a careful evaluation of the natural resources and the forest on the overall site, correct?
That's correct. And if you'll notice, that allows for a very contiguous preservation in the back area here of existing forest and proposed reforestation. And it'll be a nice contiguous area, environmental area.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
I'm going to move on to sheet FSD-2. At the request of the city, a supplemental forest stand delineation study was completed in September of 2021. The study area at staff's request was limited to our proposed limits of disturbance, which are outlined in red on this plan. Nearly the entire study area, which is considered a single forest stand or stand 1, is a mature mixed hardwood forest dominated by white oak and chestnut oak with American holly and black gum in the understory. The trees in the stand have an average diameter between 12 and 20, within the 12 to 20 inch size class, but there are numerous trees larger than 20 inches in diameter present. I'll zoom in here a bit. There are also 2 smaller stands mixed into this overall large stand. Stands 2 and 3 located here. Stand 2 is about a 1 acre stand dominated by Virginia pine, and stand 3 is a mid-successional stand comprised of red maple and sweet gum. As part of this study, all significant trees inside or within close proximity to the project limits were identified, tagged, and surveyed located. All of the trees, as you can see on the screen. And their locations were denoted on this plan.
So part of the process, I'll call it, is you do your FSD, forest stand delineation, and then from that you develop a preliminary forest conservation plan. Is that correct? Is that the procedure?
Yeah, the forest stand delineation identifies all the significant environmental areas, the high quality forest, and then you use that information to help guide the layout of your site development to avoid those areas, and then used to prepare a forest conservation plan.
So you prepared this preliminary forest conservation plan at this stage, and we actually had a public meeting about that in November 10th, this past November 10th, correct?
Correct.
And so I'm not going to get into all the details, but I would just refer the members of the Planning Commission to Exhibit 9. That contains the information about the forest conservation plan, the preliminary forest conservation plan public meeting that we had. And I would just ask you to give a quick description of this preliminary FCP, forest conservation plan. What does it consist of?
The preliminary forest conservation plan, or FCP for short, is comprised of 7 sheets. that detail how this project complies with the Forest Conservation Ordinance. Sheet 1 shown on my screen, FCP-1, shown on the screen, highlights in green the existing 99 acres of forest canopy covered located on the site outside of the critical area. Given that the canopy cover expanded since the previous FSD was approved in 2016, the canopy cover limits were updated using current aerial photographs and field confirmation in June of this past year. And the new forest canopy limits are reflected on this plan. In 2016, the existing forest cover was 90.5 acres, but it increased to 99 acres following the 2021 update. Also depicted on this plan is the forest conservation worksheet. I'll go ahead and zoom in on this. So hopefully you can see it. And what the worksheet does is it takes into consideration how much clearing is proposed and how much reforestation is required based on that. For this project, the worksheet indicates that a total of 27.3 acres of reforestation will be required. And that essentially equates to a 1-to-1 replacement. And 1-to-1 replacement will be achieved for this project through a combination of 23.8 acres of reforestation and 3.5 acres of landscape credits from the planting of 195 street trees. And I'll explain that in a little more detail in a few moments. Moving on to sheet FCP-2, the areas highlighted in purple designate the 27.3 acres of proposed forest clearing, and the light green areas represent existing forests that will be permanently preserved. This is FCP sheet 3. The project will also require the removal of 75 significant trees marked with an X on this plan. Again, the area in red outlines the limits of disturbance for this project. Of the 75 trees, 11 of the significant trees are less than 30 inches in diameter and are in poor condition, and thus they do not require a variance for removal. The other 64 trees do require a variance for removal. We have worked tirelessly with city staff on plan refinements to avoid impacts to significant trees and to minimize the number of significant tree removals.
Can you show us some of those instances where you succeeded?
In moving and shifting the LOD, I will get to that in more detail, but our LOD used to extend further to the south in this area. It used to extend further over into this area closer to Forest Drive. It also extended a little further to closer to Forest Drive over here. There were a lot of refinements around the perimeter where we were able to move the LOD. I think you can see here, if I go in a little bit, tree 889 right here, you can see the LOD was shifted around that tree. Little areas like this where we're trying to move out what is known as the critical root zone, which is the outer line, to maximize the survival of the tree. You want to try to keep your LOD as far out of the critical root zone as possible. And we've tried doing that in some areas. This tree, for instance, they get a little too close, or here, tree 916, too close to the LOD, you can't save them. As much as we tried to pull the trees, we couldn't save every one.
A lot of the variance trees are shown exactly how on the map here. They're the ones that are hashed.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
The trees that require variance, are they actually delineated on this drawing by?
Oh, well, all the trees that are to be removed are shown in an X. If we move over to the plan or the list to the right, the trees that do not require a variance are marked with a star. For instance, tree 838 is less than 30 inches and poor condition, so it does not require a variance, and that note is listed.
How about on the pictorial? How do you see that on a pictorial easily, just looking at it? So what?
We don't. We can add, when we move to the final forest conservation plan, we can color code the 11 trees. That don't
But it's the trees with the X drawn on them, right? That's what you're talking about.
Right, but see, we show all the trees to be, all the significant trees to be removed. We don't designate on the plan which ones do.
I see. Yeah.
Don't require variance. There's 11 that don't. We could color code them on the final forest conservation plan if needed.
But the ones that do are what I was worried about, because you're requiring a variance.
Right, and all the ones that require variance have an X through them. And they're
That's what I was
listed in the, yeah, right, and they're listed in the table to the right.
Gotcha. And that variance is granted by us with the overall approval, if so,
Yes.
That's you.
just to be clear.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next screen. This is sheet FCP-4, and it's the reforestation plan. This plan identifies the 14 proposed reforestation areas for this project. The chart in the upper right-hand corner, try to move over to that. Over in this area, provides the acreage for each of the labeled reforestation areas. And you can see that when you total them up, it comes to 23.8 acres, as I've already stated. And then the left side of this sheet provides the preliminary reforestation planting guide and requirements for this project. Some of the highlights of this plan include the transplanting of existing saplings that will be located in the areas to be cleared. I will go through right prior to clearing, find trees that are healthy enough and generally 3 inches in diameter or less that should be relatively easy to transplant. They'll be marked and then they'll be moved and relocated to the 2 orange areas up here along Forest Drive. So we'll be looking to transplant to that area. And another real significant item that we'll be doing is trees that are removed for the tree clearing will be turned into mulch, and that mulch will be spread evenly along the proposed limits of disturbance and the forest edge in this area. And we're doing that at the recommendation of Jim Urban, who believes that's a great way to help preserve and keep alive the existing trees that will be located right along the limits of disturbance. So we'll be adding that to our protocol moving forward. This is sheet 5. It's essentially, it has planting details on the left-hand side and the tree list and number of trees that will be planted in each of the reforestation area. And to summarize, we're going to plant over 7,000 native trees in our reforestation areas. The trees will vary in size from 1 gallon containerized stock to 1-inch caliper saplings. In some areas, they may be all 1 gallon or 3 gallon. In other areas, they may be a mixture to create more of an immediate aesthetic. I believe the meadow area is looking to have more of a mixture at the request of the current property owner. Moving on to sheet 6. This is the street tree plan, and this plan shows the locations of the 195 street trees that will be planted along Skipper's Lane, along Crystal Spring Farm Road, and along the Loop Road. Now, it may be hard to see, but if you look closely, you'll notice that the trees right along the roads are slightly more bolded than the trees off the road. Right now, I'm just talking about the trees that immediately line these streets. Those are the 195. The rest of the trees I'll get to on this next sheet. And this plan shows the locations of the 216 canopy trees and 125 ornamental trees that are to be planted throughout the development. And on this one, these other trees are slightly more bolded and those street trees are less bolded and showing the difference. These trees that are planted throughout the development are in addition to the 195 street trees that will be planted, and taking into account the proposed reforestation areas, as well as the street trees and canopy trees that will be planted on site. This project will help the city meet its forest canopy cover goal. As required by the city code, the applicant will enter into a 5-year maintenance agreement with the city of Annapolis to ensure that the reforestation areas are protected and that they establish successfully. This project will result in a no net loss of forest as required by the city's forest conservation ordinance and achieved by a combination of 23.8 acres of on-site reforestation and 3.5 acres of landscaping credits through the planting of 195 street trees. This is the overall site plan, sheet C-1.02. And I'm going to use this to kind of go through our justification for disturbing priority forests and priority areas. The applicant has exhausted all techniques to retain existing high priority forests on the site. And while I won't go through every technique, I'll just highlight a few of the more significant ones. First and foremost, the applicant relocated all development toward Forest Drive and well away from the most environmentally sensitive areas of the property. On the previous maps I showed you, the wetlands are located toward the rear of the property. Mature forest is located back there. The meadow to be replanted, critical area. We've pushed this project up and located it where city staff suggested that we place this development several years ago. More recently, we've eliminated 4 duplex units from the plan, which they were located up in this area here, closer to Forest Drive, and that preserved an additional 2.25 acres of forest and preserved 6 additional significant trees. The main independent living building, which is this structure here located between Loop Road and Skipper's Lane, we modified its configuration so that it preserved an additional 1.2 acres of forest and 3 significant trees. We originally had a series of cottages on the south side of Loop Road, generally scattered throughout this area originally. We've taken and moved all of those cottages to the west side of Crystal Spring Farm Road, which saved more of the highest high priority forest in this area. This facility has also been designed to fit within the existing site topography and to minimize grading, such that when you come out of the back of the building, you are pretty much at grade with the existing topography back through here. And also, I'd like to highlight that at the request of city staff, we went out and identified and surveyed 18 to 23 inch trees in diameter that were also in good health along within 25 feet of the proposed LOD here, and we surveyed them. The ordinance only requires us to do 24 and greater, but we looked for 18 to 23. We surveyed them, and where we could, we adjusted the LOD limits of disturbance to preserve some of those additional large trees. To preserve all of the priority forest would create an unwarranted hardship for the applicant by preventing development on a significant portion of this property. The applicant has exceeded standard practices to reduce and minimize not only the amount of forest clearing, but the amount of overall clearing on the site. In addition, the applicant will provide extensive reforestation and preservation on the remaining land as well to meet all forest conservation ordinance requirements for this project.
Thank you. The preliminary FCP that you talked about, has that been prepared in accordance with what is known as the technical manual, the Forest Conservation Technical Manual?
Yes, it has.
And then there's a section of the city code, and I'm not going to ask you to go through it step by step, but it's 2171-070 capital B. That lists all the criteria for a preliminary FCP. Does your preliminary FCP satisfy that section of the code?
I believe it does.
So now let's talk about the tree variance. This, the chairman asked, is this the responsibility of the planning commission? And it is. This is different than a zoning variance. This is a tree variance. And would you take a moment? I think you generally described it, but take a moment and explain what it is that we're asking for very specifically. What are we asking for in terms of the tree variance?
We are asking for a variance to remove 64 significant trees on this property.
Okay. All right. And those trees are located inside the proposed LOD or limit of disturbance. Is that correct?
Inside or in very close proximity to it that we don't feel we could save the tree.
Okay.
As annotated by the X's, correct?
Correct.
All right, can you refer to your FCP-3 exhibit and is that what we have in front of us now?
Yes, I've pulled it up.
Okay, all right. And again, just highlight with your cursor, what we're talking about, just to make sure everybody understands where these trees are generally located that would be taken down and only taken down as a result of the variance granted.
Right. Well, as I have already stated, the limits, proposed limits of disturbance are marked by the red lines. I just to show you the difference, the area that I'm highlighting here is a cluster of trees that will be preserved. Mm-hmm. So what is going to be cleared is what's internal to these red lines in this area. There's some additional tree clearing on the west side here, and generally in the area where the loop road and some of the cottages are going to go as well.
So the code states, for the benefit of the witness and Mr. Chairman for the Planning Commission, the code sets forth the variance criteria under section 21.71.170 capital B. And I know, Mr. Kolbaska, you're familiar with that because we've discussed that before. Let me just ask you a couple of questions with regard to that section. In your professional opinion, if a variance is not granted, would there be what we call an unwarranted hardship for the use of this property? And if your answer is in the affirmative, which I think it already is because you've made
He's already answered it.
He's already answered it. Okay, then explain why that is the case. I mean, I don't want to just use a term without giving an explanation. Why is it an unwarranted hardship?
Well, it's pretty easy. We have over 270 significant trees scattered throughout this property. It's virtually impossible to do anything with this site and avoid significant trees on the property. That's number one. Number two, we've been guided to move this development to the front of the site so that we can save the most significant environmental features at the rear of the site. Also, city staff and us and other people have made opinions that it's better off to cluster development in an area than to try to localize development all over and save individual trees. By doing that, you just end up clearing more forest. We'd rather just put everything in one spot and save large chunks of contiguous forest and the most significant environmental features on the site, which we have done.
So it's
Well said.
It's all priority forest, right? I mean, we're asking for justification for disturbing the least of the priority forest. Is that a fair statement from a layperson, would you say?
Right. We're trying to concentrate our development, if you want to say it, the lower priority, high priority areas, as opposed to the high priority areas. I mean, we're looking at degrees here of high priority.
Sure. And so it's fair to say that without the tree variances, you couldn't use this property. Is that a fair statement?
Very fair statement.
Yeah. And if the variances are granted, there's no special privilege that's given to this property owner or the applicant that would be, denied to any other applicants. Is that also a fair statement?
It's very fair. There's lots of other projects going in now that I've even helped get variances for. So
If the variances are granted, would it give this property some special privilege that other properties don't have?
absolutely not.
And in your opinion, does the variance or the variances needed arise from a condition that were conditions created by the property owner or the applicant in any way?
No.
And how about the need for variances arise because of any condition on adjacent property?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And how about water quality? Would that be adversely affected if the variance request is granted?
No, because there's a lot of reasons why. We're going to have stormwater management that's going to provide over 125% of the required environmental site design volume. We're maintaining a minimum 100-foot setback, undisturbed setbacks from existing streams. We're also doing a stream restoration activity on 502 linear feet of highly degraded eroding stream that's pumping a lot of nutrients and sediment directly into Crab Creek. So through all that, there will not be an adverse impact on water quality.
Can you summarize, and I ask you to do it briefly, what's involved in this stream restoration? Can you describe what that entails, what that's all about?
Yeah, the stream restoration, when I say that the channel's incised, the water immediately comes out of the culvert pipe under Spa Road, and there's about a 7 to 8 foot or maybe more drop. There's that much of we've lost that much of the stream bottom. The stream bottom used to be flush with the culvert. Now you've got about a 9 foot drop straight from there. So we're going to come in. Our proposal is to bring the stream bottom back up and bring it closer, stabilize the slopes. It's designed, it'll handle the flows. The nice thing about the stream restoration is that it's going to create a substrate that in lower storm events, the water comes in, it'll start to infiltrate into this substrate we're going to create, and will provide extra filtering capabilities that aren't there today. And it's going to take runoff from Spa Road. It's going to take untreated runoff from the adjacent middle school property. It's going to create a stable channel that's going to provide essentially stormwater management, if you will. That's the added benefit of this, but it's going to give a stable conveyance down to Crab Creek and stop the sediment and nutrients from just flowing down through there every time we get a decent rain event.
And one final question for you, Mr. Klobasco. Based on your testimony and our exhibit package, is it your professional opinion that this application satisfies the Forest Conservation Act under the city code, which is under section 21.71?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions at this time for Mr. Klobasco.
Mr. Klobasco, I have 4 questions. The first one's probably the easiest. For each tree that for which you receive a variance, is there a reforestation requirement?
There is not, because these trees are located within existing forest. So we're already required to do reforestation for the removal.
I see. So it's not because of the variance, but it's because of the general clearing that you have to do, that you're required to do reforestation?
Right, that's the mitigation, yes.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Walton, that's the 1-for-1 tree replacement requirement and under the code, yes.
Right, so actually the reforestation exceeds what you might be required if you were only required to plant 1 tree for every variance tree. So you have to go beyond it, right?
That's how I view it. Yes.
True. Yes, that's right.
Right. Because the reforestation is done by acreage. It's not done by individual trees. Okay.
Correct.
So let me just restate to make sure that everybody understands. The reforestation requirement is because of clearing a certain number of acres, and you have reforestation that you need to do. At least it's calculated at least 1-for-1. It's not because these trees are anything special. You have to go beyond that. I haven't made myself clear. As they say sometimes in court, strike that from the record, please. Let me go on to another topic. What do you calculate to be the estimated approximate cost of the stream restoration?
We're estimating that we're going to throw a number, I think $100 a linear foot on there. So about 500,000.
And it's not required, has it been required by any kind of law, ordinance, legislation, rule, regulation?
Not to my knowledge. It was a request from the city.
Okay. Are you committed to do the stream restoration even if it costs more than 500?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Unless you want to change, unless Alan
No,
wants to say something
we've
different.
committed to do that, Mr. Waldman, and that, early on, that was a problem on the site and a problem adjacent to the site, and it wasn't going to get any better. And, as part of the overall offer of mitigation, this is what we're going to do.
Okay. And who's going to design it and oversee it?
Well, it's been designed.
Oh, it has been? Okay.
Yeah. Yes,
All right.
it has been designed, and
Okay.
it would be part of I guess it would be part of the grading permit, wouldn't it, Mr. Klabaska?
I would assume so.
Have you offered those or shown those plans to the Crab Creek Conservancy?
I have not. I don't know. They were submitted with the application package, correct, Alan? So they could have seen them. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's seen these.
They're under a tab, yes.
All right. Well, that's if you have access to the whole thing and you know how to get to it. If they asked for a copy, would you provide them one?
Sure.
Of your stream. Okay.
We would.
Stream work. Let me move on to the maintenance agreement that's involved in any of the reforest, I guess, both reforested trees and newly planted trees. What's involved in that maintenance agreement other than just going out once or twice a year to see if they're alive?
Well, we have to this is only a preliminary plan. When we get to the final, we'll work through those details. But there's going to be annual watering. We're going to have to control invasive species growth. Also, if there's mortality, there'll have to be a replacement. There's performance standards for survivability of what's planted. We'll end up mulching the trees. There'll be a whole plan that'll go through that, and it'll be listed in there for 5 years. And
you treat the street trees differently than you treat the meadow forestation and so forth. So is it different kind? You look at those things differently in terms of maintenance?
Probably. The reforestation area is going to have some different control techniques and maintenance techniques to it. But whatever is appropriate for the street trees or the ornamentals or the reforestation areas, that's what will be put together and approved with the final forest conservation plan.
Okay. And on that note, have you had the opportunity to see comments that Mr. Urban wrote about the planting and soil work for the street trees?
Oh, absolutely. I've had conversations with Mr. Urban over this. So we've discussed this as well.
Are you comfortable with those suggestions as being sound and practical?
I am. I've already mentioned that we've taken one of his recommendations into account by the spreading of
the chips
for the dead trees. The trees were taken down, mulching them up and spreading them along the limits of disturbance.
Yes. Oh yeah, good. Okay. I have no further questions of Mr. Klobasco. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, then I'm gonna go ahead and move on to my next witnesses. If that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
That is okay. And before you take down that screen there, just for members of the public, what you were looking at was what the existing structures on the property are, and the X trees are where the development is going to go, basically, in simple terms. So if anybody wants to really understand why those trees are getting removed, because you got to put the building somewhere. And the trade-off is to save some very important lands on the other side of the property. So yeah, you don't see, for the members of the public looking at that, you don't see the design buildings being put there. The buildings you do see are what's existing, structures that will no longer be there with that parking lot. And all the X'd out trees are pretty much where the development is going to go. In a very big, good trade-off, as Mr. Glasgow elaborated. That's all I wanted to.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can I just elaborate on one thing real quick, following up on what you said?
Sure.
Yeah, I did neglect to discuss that there's an existing office building right here, and there's also two residences here and here. This office building is going to be obviously removed and a lot of this area reforested. So I just want to quickly point that out. Thank you.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I have. And thank you very much, Mr. Glasgow. That was good. Any other commissioners have any last minute questions?
Is the residence just to the west of the office building, what's happening with that?
It will be removed and turned into reforestation.
Okay.
As the buffer area from Forest Drive to the building structures, correct?
Correct.
And is there any grading that's going to be necessary to build it back up to the height on either side of that office building? My recollection is it's kind of set into the hill.
Yeah, there's a grading plan. Let me see if it's shown on here. Yeah, see, there's going to be some grade tie back in. We've got some grading along the back of these units here.
I'm talking about filling in where the office building is going to be removed.
I don't believe we're filling in. I believe we're removing it, and then we're going to get good soil there and replant it. I don't know that we're going to build it back up.
The weird thing is the office building is still shown on this plan, you know? I guess it's good so you know what was there, but some people might think it's going to remain.
No.
Right, it's not.
All right, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I'll call Mark Palusi, and then we're going to show you most of the exhibits concerning Mr. Palusi are under exhibit, or most of the plans are under exhibit 22. And I think we'll answer a lot of the questions that may have been raised about context and where the improvements are going to go in relation to the property. So Mr. Palusi, if you would identify yourself and tell the members of the Planning Commission what it is you do as a profession.
Good evening. I'm Mark Palusi, Jr., landscape architect, licensed in Maryland since 1997. I'm principal and director of operations for Mahan Reichel Associates, which is a landscape architecture firm located in Baltimore City. Our team has been practicing in the state of Maryland, Mid-Atlantic, and worldwide since for over 35 years. Alan?
Yes, go ahead. Tell the Planning Commission about your background and experience. And I have shown your professional biography on the screen here. Just take a moment so everybody's comfortable with your experience and your ability to design this project.
Sure. As I said, I'm a landscape architect. I've been practicing for 27 years, plus after graduating from Penn State University in 1993. I've been fortunate to work in both public and private sector on a variety of different institutional, large-scale public projects, either riverfront designs. I've worked on museums, presidential memorials, large-scale developments, and most recently, district-wide plans, which I think that this kind of falls into multiple buildings, large tracts of land, both in mainly in urban conditions over the past 10 years. So I've brought planning and design expertise that I will walk you through this evening about how we arrived at the organization of buildings, the road networks, the pedestrian circulation, and the intended development of the public realm and open space.
Very good. Mr. Chairman, based on what you have heard and the professional biography of Mr. Palusi, I would offer him as an expert witness, as a landscape architect and in the field of site designing.
Thank you. Proceed.
All right, thank you. So I'm now going to direct your attention to our Exhibit 22, what we call Tab 22. And before I do that, I just want to confirm with you, Mr. Palusi, you're familiar with the city code and the site design requirements under Chapter 21.22. Is that correct?
Yes, both under 2122 and 2162.
So would you agree that the site has been designed in conformance with those code sections?
Yes, to the best of our ability.
All right. Let's take a few minutes here, and I think this will help put things in perspective. And let's look at our tab 22. And I'll direct your attention to the first slide. And would you say this is the overall site? First of all, is this visible to you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission?
Yes.
Okay, so would you agree that this is the site from, I don't know, 5,000 feet up, something like that?
Yes, I agree. The red and white line represents approximately the 175-acre parcel which the team has been discussing.
Okay, so this is Forest Drive here, and then we go down to Spa Road, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And then next, is this a depiction, again, from about 5,000 feet of what the proposed development or limit of disturbance would look like from 5,000 feet up?
That is correct.
Okay. And this brings it a little bit closer. Could you describe this slide? This is the third slide under tab 20.
Sure. So the orientation, our intention over the first couple of slides here is to progressively move in to see a higher level of design and organization of the main focus development area, which Mike previously walked us through to get to the focus area of the development within the priority forest. This again was that what showed up is the white area in his diagrams focusing the development, and how we arrived at this has been working with the city staff to consolidate the development on the northern portion of the site closest to Forest Drive and connecting to Spa Road. There are some infrastructure elements such as the force main, which runs along and had organized the location of Skipper's East in our illustration here between the Mason Court buildings and the IL building. And
Mason
that
Court buildings, right here, Mason Court buildings, correct?
1 and 2, correct.
Yeah. And then independent living circle here.
Is there, and that justified the location of Skipper's. We did have a connection point for Crystal Spring Drive off of Forest.
Right here.
And we had the connection to Spa Road that would hit at a point which was discussed at our last meeting with the comprehensive plan to potentially continue to the east and Page Right. That established the framework of the organization of the site. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the diagrams that kind of follow the beginning illustrations here. And as we move from Spa through Skipper's towards the page top, we call it in these illustrations Skipper West, the area that is to the left or west of Crystal Spring. And that is intended to carry through with the comprehensive plan to the adjacent neighborhoods of Riders Glen, Woodside Gardens, and Newtown 20 in the future.
All right, I'll move to the next one.
Okay.
again, a little bit closer.
A little bit closer, yes. So this is saying that we're at approximately a 500-foot elevation above, focusing us in on the heart of the development of the independent living building and the Mason Courts on the north side of Skipper's East.
Yes.
Okay, I think that in this illustration, actually, Alan, could you go back one? Thank you.
How's that? That one?
No, go back just one slide. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about as the team has talked about the consolidation or the minimization of the limit of disturbance. And Mike spoke about the contiguous forest that we were trying to maintain as a buffer on the perimeter of the entire site. It became very important to city staff as well as our team to maintain the distances between buildings to property lines, as well as the depths of the forests, just to point out how much space that we are retaining in the north on the page top from forest to the cottages in the single family home area. We have a minimum separation depth of minimum separation of 270 feet from the property line to the building, and the forest depth along that side is 225 feet. If we move clockwise, then to the Mason units, there's 270 feet of forest, either existing or through the reforestation areas. That's 270 minimum feet of forest depth along that side. On the IL to the horse farm property, the minimum forest was established or expanded. Originally, it was around 100 feet of separation. It is now 200 feet of forest depth. And on the Riders Glen side, right side of the page, we have a minimum forest width of 165 at the tightest point of those two units to the existing townhomes on the western side.
And where I'm circling here, this is where the current location of the office building is, more or less. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, move on.
Okay. Yes. So zooming in, there's a number of open spaces which are being developed, amenity spaces, but also public and private courtyards for the residents of this community. We have been called, and we have perspectives to follow this to show the character and design intent of a number of these public spaces. But along the street of Skipper's East, and we'll talk about this a little bit more through some of the diagrams, it is established as a complete street. There is there's travel lane in each direction. There is parallel parking. There is also bike lanes on both sides of the street of Skipper's that traverse from Spa Road all the way over to the western edge of the property. The buildings are basically set back a minimum of 21 feet from the back of curb to the building face of the IL. They're 26 feet from the back of curb to the Mason units on the north side of the street. There's a central park between the Mason units. That space is approximately 110 by 135 feet. There are two main courtyards, which are at grade and at street grade and open to Skipper's Lane. The western one is approximately 110 by 115. We have an entry court, which is in the center of the IL unit, coming off of Skipper's East. And we have an east courtyard. Sometimes we call it the S courtyard because of the curvilinear paths within. That space is about 165 by 115. The team also discussed the way that the site is set up, that there is basically a one-level grade change between Skipper's East and the Loop Road on the lower portion of the site. It's 10 to 11 feet. It allows for underground parking virtually under the complete footprint of the IL building and all the fingers which stick up towards Skipper's East. So I think it's important to note that is one of the ways that the team has been successful in limiting the amount of disturbance on the site is all the residential parking and some visitor parking is underneath the footprints of both the IL and Mason units. On the rear side of the IL building, which shows up in a brownish tone, are green roofs over top of part of that parking structure. In the center of the building is an amenity terrace, which again is on structure, but is on the backside of the amenity and restaurant areas and community areas within the off the first level of the IL building. The site steps down then to the bottom left where Alan's hand is moving to the healthcare building, which is in that location. It's a 2-story structure, has its own private courtyards that will be controlled with a fence line that's around that courtyard within that. On the right side, moving down, some multi-purpose and community rooms. There is again an at-grade courtyard and garden area that's adjacent to the loop road on the southeast side of the building. Lastly, in regards to makeup and organization of the site, all the cottages are on our loop road or on Skipper's East. I think they're working with the city staff. We were able to arrive, maybe Alan, if you go back one screen, we'll see all the cottages.
I'm going to move nice and easily. How about that?
That's good. I
Okay.
think one of the another important thing in regards to the planning and the design.
Those cottages, right? That's what I'm.
That's correct.
Yep.
Within these units, we have 2 different types. We have a rear loaded unit, which is on Skipper's West. This allowed us to bring the buildings a little bit closer to the roadway. The building faces are set back 39 feet from the face of the porch to the curb line. There are sections which illustrate this in a little bit more detail, but those dimensions, we have a continuous 8-foot grass verge where the street trees are planted from the back of the curb. There's a 6-foot community sidewalk on both sides, on each side of the street. And then the buildings are set back 25 feet from the back of the sidewalk to the porch. To maximize the relationship and the amount of green that's on Skipper's was very important to the city staff. So these units at a point in time were switched from front loaded to rear loaded garages. And that did help with the consolidation of the limit of disturbance along this stretch of Skipper's West. It's more of a traditional layout than on Road A in the loop road, that those cottages on a private road have the garages on the front side, maintaining that approximate 39-foot setback to the curb, but having the drives and the garages on the front side, in this case, maximized the tree save areas behind the buildings and limited the amount of disturbance on the backside of the buildings. I think you can skip ahead then.
Yep.
1 or 2 slides slowly.
Yeah, this is a slide that following this, we're going to look at the actual views indicated by the numeric circles, right? I'll let you explain that.
Sure. So what we wanted to do is take an opportunity to walk through some of the character images, design intent of what some of these public spaces, as well as the streetscape, should feel like, and is represented in our earlier exhibits of Exhibit 6 and is consistent with the previous submittals. So we'll show 7 different views. We'll make sure that we reorient. There is a key plan at the top right of each of the pages that keys us into each of the views. So the first one that is up is along Skipper's Lane at the
All right, let's
corner.
get to that.
Okay, at the corner of
That's
one of the
number one?
Maison units.
Yep.
Yes. And it's looking across towards the IL in what we call the East Courtyard. This gives a sense of the space, the 6-foot walkway, which is on our right side, the parallel parking, the 2 lanes, parallel parking on the opposite side of the street, the rhythm of the street trees, and the context and the feel of this space. It's important for me to recognize is like it was our intent to focus on the landscape intent in the public realm. We've grayed back kind of the architecture. So this is not to depict the materiality of the architecture, the finish, but is representative of all the massing, the organization of the windows, the porches and things which will be further explained by Aaron and his team later on. The next image.
I got the impression that there was a green strip between the sidewalk and the curb.
Okay, that is along Skipper's West on the
Okay.
residential side, where we have the parallel parking. The sidewalks are addressed more in a traditional kind of urban fashion, where we're allowing individuals to exit the cars directly on the public sidewalk. And that 8-foot verge is dedicated on the back side of the sidewalk away from the roadway.
How wide is that sidewalk there?
6 feet.
Okay.
And that is a common dimension throughout the neighborhood and community. So there are diagrams that show the locations of all the public sidewalks. They are all continuous 6 foot wide.
All right, we'll move to perspective number 2.
Number 2 brings us up in the air, looking again at the eastern courtyard, looking down into that space. It is approximately 165 deep off the back of the sidewalk, about 110 feet wide. Each of the spaces is being programmed for multi-purpose use. Each of the courtyards has an open lawn, integrates the stormwater management within each of them. All the stormwater management areas will be fully planted, plus additional gardens and amenity features within. There'll be canopies and structures different for each of the courtyards. So each of them has their own identity, but each will have a connection out to Skipper's Lane on the north side of the buildings.
All right, we'll move to number 3.
Number 3 brings us down looking at the same courtyard, giving a feel if you were on the sidewalk, looking into that same courtyard. Fixed benches, there'll be movable tables and chairs at different points within the courtyard, most likely closer to the building and the dining areas. But this is a character image of the amount of canopy that we're proposing and the amount of ground level planting that is in the design.
All right, I'll move to number 4.
Number 4 takes us to this called the Central Park. Again, that space is about 110 feet wide. It's 135 feet deep off of the sidewalks of Skipper's Lane. This space is between the 2 Maison Court buildings. The Maison Court buildings are themselves 4 stories. There's 1 level at grade of parking, and Aaron's team will define that a little bit better about how those footprints actually work. There are units on the front side addressing Skipper's, but then there are 3 floors that are above that. So the building height or the number of stories of both the IL and the Maison Courts along Skipper's are 4 stories from grade.
Now, is this space meant to be an active space?
Yes, multi-purpose, active. It is relatively flat. There's a minimum pitch in here. It sets up, I think, very nicely between the 2 buildings because the buildings, the first floor levels are flat. So it helps with the setup of this space.
So have you thought about putting a bocce court in?
Not fixed, but we are looking at, because it is an open lawn, informal bocce. passive and active play. Could be a ceiling of lights within here. We have proposed swings that are kind of on the back side of this that are part of the documents as well. So fixed and movable furniture, could be events out here. Fairly intended to be flexible and fully programmed.
Well, if you put in a bocce court and you give me the franchise, I'll split the proceeds with you.
Okay.
Because I have a feeling it would be extremely popular.
Mhm.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Mr. Waldman, I think you all used to have the Frisbee test. I think this passes the Frisbee test. Right?
Right. Well, there's no life without bocce, you know.
Well, I understand. All right. Mr. Palusa, anything else you want to add on perspective 4?
No, I think we can move to the east, or excuse me, the west courtyard. I think we have
All right.
2 views of the west courtyard.
All right, that's number 5. Yeah.
This again, so this is kind of in the northwest corner, looking back into the space. We show a trellis area, canopy structure within this space on the north side of the green. Again, on the back between the sidewalk, which is in our foreground, you see a little portion of that in the trellis. There's a fair amount of stormwater management, which is intended to be in here. And again, that element will be fully landscaped and gives us the separation and the creation of, you know, a semi-private space within this building. So we get a better sense of that when we move to the next image. And we're elevated from the bird's eye looking back down into the space. This is intended for another, it is relatively flat. Alan, if you move on 1.
All right, so we're moving to perspective 6.
Yes, please.
Okay.
This was intended to be another lawn that could, have the bocce, not as a fixed element, but a generous open lawn. It will be fairly constant elevation. There could be a feature element within this space as well. We are looking at opportunities to integrate art or sculptural elements within the landscape in several of the courtyard spaces as amenity features and focal elements for the community and the residents.
All right, we'll move to 7.
Yes, and I think that's the last of our perspectives. This is on the south side of the building, just off of the loop road. The perpendicular parking would be to our back. This is looking at, again, flexible open lawn that is framed by landscape. On the right side of the picture here are the community spaces, and I believe there's an aerobic room, possibly a yoga room, a maker's room. At the terminus with kind of the small little tower is the multi-purpose and chapel area that is a focus and an organizing element for this central green.
Okay, let's move on to the next one, which, you know, depicts the building types. You want to explain what what this slide shows?
I think that we've talked about this briefly, but we had kind of basically a land use diagram or a unit diagram. On the left side, the yellow tones, that's the organization of all the cottages organized on the west side of Crystal Spring Farm Road. There's 30 units within those 2 yellow bubbles. The Maison in the orange, kind of rust color. The Maison Court independent living apartments, said they were 4 stories. The IL building in the red, 4 stories over top of structured parking. The healthcare and multi-purpose rooms on the south side in that secondary bar.
Okay, let's look at the next one, which should show vehicle.
Shows the vehicular circulation. And this is kind of a layering of all the different elements that go in to set up the streets and work together. This is the vehicular framework, again, connecting from Spa Road, carrying from the right side up to Skipper's Lane. In between the two Maison units are single loaded driveways to either come into the entry court for the IL or to wrap around Central Park and gain access to the structured parking for both Mason Court buildings. Skipper's crosses over Crystal Spring Farm Road in a small traffic circle. At that point, we are dedicating space or reserving space for 2 bus stops that could be integrated into the mass transit system for the city. Skipper's West will continue across. It will temporarily dead end at the property line, but is intended to provide the continuation of Skipper's into the adjoining properties. As mentioned, the units, the cottage units along Skipper's are rear loaded. So we have access roads on the back side, on the north side and the south side of the roadway with the driveways. The loop road then, also called Road A in our illustrations, in front of the cottages, wraps around and then carries in front to the healthcare and chapel and tees back in to Skipper's Lane. The next slide.
Talk about pedestrian
Working-
circulation.
Yeah, working in tandem.
Are we talking about the site?
Actually,
Let's talk about the parking.
talk about the parking.
Yeah.
Again, reiterating, I am repeating myself a little bit. The structured parking is underneath the Maison units for all the residents and the 2 rectangles on the north side of Skipper's Lane. The other orange tone, yellowish orange tone, the structured parking mass for the IL building is there under the northern portion of that structure. Along Skipper's Lane in the blue dashes is parallel parking on 2 sides of the road. That is where the sidewalk is adjacent to the curb line. Your question earlier, Mr. Commissioner. Every other case we have the grass verge at the back of the curb and then the sidewalk. But this is our urban condition between the 4-story buildings. On the back side of the building, there is perpendicular parking. There's a little service court on the back side of the IL, and then along the loop road.
Why is there parking along the loop road?
It's our most efficient way of addressing a parking need. Because it is a private road, it was another means of reducing impervious parking surfaces and not having an inboarding, a double bay of parking. So we felt it was efficient and eliminated the redundancy of a drive aisle.
Of a what?
Of a drive aisle. So
Well, how did you come up with the need? How did you come up with the need?
The need is just like we wanted to provide both staff, visitor, and community parking. If anybody was to drive from the cottages over to the common spaces, to the multi-purpose rooms, is just like we wanted to provide parking on the back side of the building on this private road.
How much parking is below the IL building?
Over 225 spaces.
And how many employees maximum number of employees do you expect at any one time?
I don't have that number. Alan, do you know?
I believe it's somewhere around 200 at the most.
Employees
Yes.
at one time?
No, this is
No, that's
very,
total employees. At
yeah.
one time, Larry, how many would you have on premises at any given time?
well, probably at any one time, probably somewhere around 75 or 80 at any one time. We'll have 2 12-hour shifts in the healthcare center. Our dining staff will come in. There'll be a morning dining staff and there'll be an evening dining staff. So they'll be shifting around. So my guess is somewhere around 75 or 80 at any one time, probably the most at any one time.
do you expect any of those employees who arrive by public transit or to be dropped off by others?
Yeah, we hope to have public transit. Well, we not hope to. We will have transportation, bus transportation throughout the city that will be picking up employees. And we've also had conversations with Tom Smith about the potential for a bus stop on Skipper's Lane. I don't know. We haven't had any extensive conversations about that. But if we were able to get a bus lane or a stop on Skipper's Lane, we probably have a lot of our staff come through that way also.
Uh-huh. And out of your people in independent living, based on your experience, what percentage of them own cars?
I would say when we open, it's going to be pretty close to 100% of the independent living are going to have cars.
And you have how many units there?
We have 302 units throughout the campus.
What about in the independent living building?
We have 216 in the main independent living building, 30 cottages on the to the west of Skipper's Lane, and then 56 Mason Court units.
Does every person with an independent living apartment automatically get a underground parking space?
Yes. The question becomes if they have two cars, we're going to have some additional parking for that.
I guess maybe the relevant question here is, are you just satisfying one for one the code requirements for minimum parking?
I would say what we're trying to do is maximize the number of parking units within the structure of the underground parking footprint, if you will, and then minimizing the number of parking spaces that would be on surface due to minimizing impervious surfaces and other such things.
But it would be interesting to note what if you're providing more parking than is required by code for the number of, I mean, let's put aside the cottages, but for the stuff on the east side, are you providing more parking spaces than required by code? I've looked at that, but I don't remember the answer to that.
And is there a lower parking requirement for facilities for care for the aged?
I'm gonna have to just say I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. We've got some other team members on there. Maybe Kevin Johnson, our civil.
I believe there is, but Kevin, are you able to weigh in on that? Maybe not. We'll get you an answer.
Okay,
yeah, we'll get an answer on that.
Mr. Smith may actually know. He may help with us with that answer. Okay, all right, we can move on. Thank you.
Kevin is here now.
Go ahead. All right, we'll move on. We'll get you an answer on the parking question.
We'll get an answer.
All right.
Alan, Kevin was on there. Kevin is on there.
At the wrong time. So in the IL building, there's 216 units and there's 280 structured parking spaces within the footprint of the garage. So even with the one unit, one car per unit, we still have adequate staff parking. The surface parking is to promote easy access for guests that don't want the hassle of the garage, or as Mark alluded to, movement within the community. And Larry's correct that the experience is that when first moving in, our residents do bring their cars with them, but over time, the experience is that they find that they don't need them, don't use them, or don't operate them anymore. And so the overall demand does decline over time.
The visitor's entrance is through the main. I don't have the
exact number in front of me, but we do exceed the minimum parking required by the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the point, is you're exceeding. But the main visitor's entrance is in the front door up off of Skipper's Lane, is it not?
That's correct.
So you're not expecting visitors off the loop road, are you?
It's a combination. I mean, there's the parallel parking on skippers that, you know, our guests may enjoy, but also the chapel and some of the other community amenity spaces are located more to the back. So if you're going to a specific function, you may find it easier to just go to the back of the loop road to come in. You know, it was the balancing act of providing you know, as much structured parking as we could while still providing a limited amount of surface parking so as to not increase our impervious footprint too much, but at the same time, meeting the needs of the various activities that may be going on at any point in time during the day.
Well, okay, let's keep going on. Maybe we'll get a closer look at how many spaces are there and what they're doing and what could be done in substitution of those spaces.
Good idea.
Okay, so let's move, we can move on.
All right. Mark, any more comments on parking?
No, let's go to the pedestrian circulation.
All right, pedestrian circulation. Go ahead.
Following the framework of the vehicular circulation, pedestrian sidewalks are proposed on most of both sides of the street. We have a couple of anomalies to that to minimize impervious area. There is a singular sidewalk from Spa connecting to the multi-purpose trail on the right side of the screen, on the south side of the road, which is the horse farm side, continuing up to the IL building. At that point along Skippers, there will be sidewalks on both sides adjacent to the parallel parking on Skippers. There are sidewalks then in the center of the IL drop-off area and wrapping around the park to the Maison units. On Crystal Spring Drive, connecting out to Forest Drive and also down to the southern end of the property, we have continuous walks on both sides of the street. From where the cursor is now, moving on the loop road in front of the cottages. This is because we only have 4 cottages on the outside of the curve. We felt that we could deal with just a singular sidewalk on this private drive, connecting us from Crystal Spring up to Skippers West. The dash lines running through the priority forest is an opportunity to create trails, mulch trails, as well as a hard surface pervious trail system that is behind the IL. That would be an amenity feature for the community as well as the city.
All right, move to the tree.
I think we go to the trees, which is all working towards our complete streets of the vehicular, the pedestrian circulation, and then the canopy that would be above us. Of the 195 trees which are proposed as part of the streetscape plan, we have designated different zones of the streets for different species. Starting from Spa Road, coming in at A1, that is a willow oak. All these are native or adaptive species and typically used in Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic region.
So all of, when you say willow in area 1, willow oak, does that mean that's what you're planting along both sides?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a second tree species which is behind that and has diversification in that second row, but that is not part of the category. That is not part of the street tree palette itself. We'll talk about that on the next couple of slides. When we get between, we change the species to within the zones of A2. That's an American linden. And in the center of the block of Skippers, where we have the Central Park and the drop-off court, that's a London plane and willow oak species mix in the center portion there. As we continue across to Skippers West, we switch the palette again in kind of the purple in the A2. Actually, I think it's A3. Eyes are getting bad on me. That's a sugar maple. Crystal Spring Farm Road is an American elm a Jefferson cultivar, which is proposed, which is disease resistant and upright form and commonly used in a streetscape setting. On the loop road, road A, and the loop road, area C, we move to, instead of a monoculture of trees, we have a little bit more diversification here of oaks, which is transitioning us to the forest edges. It's a mix of swamp white, scarlet, burr, and willow oaks along that yellow zone. The next page
I hate to be
shows,
a nudge, but are sugar maples a good thing to plant? Are they long-lived? Are they hard?
Yes.
Do they fall apart?
no,
Okay.
their standard street trees give us a change in fall color, as you can see there, the Green Mountain cultivar, not supportive of a silver maple, but sugar, absolutely. The next page, getting close to the end. Interstitial spaces being the courtyards around the IL, perimeter of the buildings going up and transitioning to the forest edge, back of the cottages, side yards, backyards of the cottages. There's a much more diverse mix of plant material, which is proposed for the other spaces. What Mike and Kevin have talked about is the additional trees, which we have documented to be planted, are over 300 different shade trees and ornamental trees above the 195 street trees that are part of the plan. I think on the next page, within these green zones and within the limit of disturbance, much more diversified palette of hardwoods, red and sugar maple, white and shagbark hickory, American beech, sweet gum, black gum, London plane trees, a variety of oaks, a little bit more diversification than the street trees proposed, but we're looking at scarlet swamp pin oak and white oaks, American and silver lindens within this mix, and zelkovas. There's a variety of flowering trees, which will be accents into the landscape, including serviceberry, redbud, fringe trees, dogwoods, witch hazel, magnolia, and cherries.
Move to the next one.
Sure.
What do we see here, this site plan? What is it?
Nothing different. It's just a pause if we have to come back to it. We could, the next couple of slides just illustrate the building to street relationships. There are several cross sections which were part of our submittal. I'm not sure that we have. Yeah, I think we can. We can go through these relatively quickly. We have sections cut for each of the streets. If we go to the first page, we'll go through these quickly unless somebody wants to ask questions, and we can pause and answer. Typically, all of our cartways are 12 feet wide in each of the lanes. These first
Can I stop you and ask you what your assessment of 12-foot lanes is? And I mean, is that your preference, or are you doing that because Public Works told you to? What's your assessment of how fast people will drive in a 12-foot lane in a city street?
My
and
understanding,
maybe that's not a fair question because you're not a traffic engineer, but I'm curious from a landscape architecture standpoint, you know, how you would feel about the public realm with a 12-foot lane in an urban space.
I believe we were told to use 12 feet. Kevin Johnson can come into the conversation as well. It has varied at different times, but Kevin's back on the screen.
Commissioner Klein, I mean, as discussed in our last meeting, we do think that there is an opportunity to reduce the travel lane width to reduce speeds even further. My recollection is that the 12-foot was a requirement of Public Works.
And I know you're thinking about reducing that lane for just reducing the speed, but what other options for making use of that extra footage if you reduce it, like making biking better and safer, dividing the lanes from the bike lane, or maybe adding a hashed area? Is there anything else you've thought about doing other than just shortening the lanes or thinning the lanes?
Well, I guess it depends on the vehicle that you use to reduce the lane widths. Do you introduce a physical barrier? Do you introduce striping? I feel that with a one-way cycle track lane that we have, the 5 foot is sufficient for the bikeway. Other than reducing the pavement width, you really aren't going to have a significant impact on travel speeds, but maybe Nancy Randall in her section can talk about that some more.
And don't take my wording now as driving you one way or the other. I'm just curious at the moment of all the options you've explored. And a 5 or 6 foot lane, to me, I mean, I'd want it a little bigger than that, but I don't know, over to Alex for what's really required. He's the bike guy.
If speeds are truly slow and people are actually driving 20 to maximum 25 miles an hour, 5 foot bike lane is fine. But with a 12-foot lane width, that's the width of a lane on Route 50. I'd rather see, my opinion is city streets should never have lanes wider than 9 feet. I know I have a different view of that than the public works folks, and we've argued round and round about that many times. But I think 10 feet is something that they could live with. And still, there's no tight turning radiuses really anywhere in this development. So, a 10-foot lane without a tight turn is going to be very much fine for, our largest fire trucks, which is typically the comment they make, or, garbage trucks or whatever other kind of delivery vehicles can navigate those fine. So that means, if you were to have lanes of 10 feet, that leaves 4 more feet, and I wouldn't suggest necessarily reducing the right of way, but the 4 feet could be a grassy median or something like that would allow you to narrow the lanes and in the parlance of sort of planner speak, it adds some friction to the street so people don't drive.
How about protecting the bikers, protecting people on the bike paths, from people texting and swerving over? Give them a little something.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into a whole discussion of bike infrastructure here, because you have to do something different than have a bike lane between the parking lane and the travel lane. You're starting to get into separated bike infrastructure, which I think as long as the speeds are different, it's not really needed. If this truly is, if people are truly driving 20 miles an hour, an on-road bike lane is fine. But if you're going to have 12-foot lanes, and the appearance to a driver with just a 12-foot lane and a 5-foot lined bike lane, the appearance to a driver is that it's a 17-foot lane. And, people are going to drive fast on that. And I'm not saying it's malicious on anybody's part, but drivers drive at the speed they feel comfortable. And that's just, it's a human trait. And if you give them that width, they're going to drive at the speed that they feel comfortable, which, like I said, in West Annapolis, we have a long straight street like this on Melvin Avenue that's got 10-foot lanes and a 4-foot bike lane. And people pretty regularly drive 40, 45 miles an hour because you can. And so, I would think, as the owners of this development, primarily with older folks walking around, you'd want people to drive really slow. And I'm just really surprised there isn't more pushback from the applicant about having narrower streets, given that there are going to be older folks walking and trying to have a nice time outside.
If I could just address a couple of those points. Other than where we have the parallel parking, we did separate, what we feel is a generous sidewalk width of 6 feet, from the travel way. And I don't have the linear foot memorized, but part of the traffic calming approach of adding the roundabout that kind of bifurcates the project is the traffic calming aspect of that. And I appreciate your opinion about the width of the travel lanes and the speeds that they generate, but we were trying to work within the complete streets guidelines to try and come up with an optimization exercise that kind of met the needs of all of the various modes of traffic that are coming through. And we certainly understand your interest in narrower lanes, and this was where we kind of landed based on all of those criteria.
I just hate to have have your management come back to the city in a few years and say, we have to have traffic calming, people are driving too fast. I mean, we know that kind of thing happens, and I just, now's the time to fix that and not later when it's a problem. So
I would guarantee you this is going to see a lot of traffic from that huge neighborhood, Hunt Meadow, going over to the Safeway to shortcut to the CVS rather than going out on Forest Drive, which is why we have Skipper's Lane connecting. So a lot of traffic and a lot of speeding.
So at this point, I've raised my objections, and I'll just put an end to it at this point.
Proceed on, please.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mark?
Both of these sections are on typically of Skipper's. A is the entry area from Spa with a single loaded pedestrian sidewalk on the left side or south side of that roadway. Section B gets us into the urban condition between the Maison Court and the IL, where we have the parallel parking outside of the bike lanes in the adjacent sidewalk next to that parallel parking, and the planting areas outboard of those sidewalks. Next page, Alan. Section C looks at Crystal Spring Farm Road. This is typical of the loop road, continuous 12-foot lanes, 8-foot planting areas between the face of the curb and the sidewalks, and a typical 6-foot sidewalk. In a number of cases, adjacent to the roadways and between the buildings and the sidewalks are depressed areas, the environmental site design features for stormwater management. So you can see the depressions within the landscape of these sections, and then the tie back to grade as quickly as we can is illustrated on the 3-to-1 max slopes of section C. Section D, this is Skipper's Lane West. This is illustrating the relationships of the roadways to the buildings without parking on the front side through this block. Again, the 8-foot planted verge for the street trees, 6-foot walkways, and then a separation to the buildings is approximately 25 feet from the back of the sidewalk to the face of the structures.
All right, I'll move to the next one.
Mr. Hyatt, can I take a quick second to do a time check and plan for what we're going to do for the next 30 to 40 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, it's 9:35. I assume we're at least going to go to 10:15. But Mr. Hyatt, how much more presentation do we have? And is it going to bridge into tomorrow night? I'm sorry, the next meeting? I presume it would, based on what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I think it will. I think it will, Mr. Chairman. If we finish up with Mr. Pelusi, then we would present our architect next, and we would conclude with that. Then we'd have 2 more witnesses, traffic and land planning, and that would end up concluding the case. So we probably need an hour or an hour and a half to finish the case next hearing night, and then we'd be done with our.
Plus the additional 30 minutes or so tonight to finish up, right?
Correct. That's right.
Okay. And being smart, Julian, do we still have anyone online to testify tonight that we could knock out a few of?
Yes, we have 4 people on right now.
4 people on. And Mr. Hyatt, actually, is any of those the Crab Creek, Mr. Julian?
Let me double check.
And how Alan and rest of the commissioners, I'm looking at maybe squeezing in these public comments and then going back to the presentation if we could. That way we get some more public comments out of the way, and the applicant can also use that information to come back and rebuttal later on. I know it's kind of out of order, but we do have people online, and I think it'd be beneficial to knock them out if they're here tonight. Comments, commissioners?
I agree with that, especially if the nature of the comments they're going to make relate to the forest issues that that we've gone over tonight. So it's kind of fresh in our minds. So especially if it's on environmental concerns, tonight would be the time to do it. I agree.
Yeah, and I don't see anything really on traffic until we actually have a traffic presentation. I would rather say, not hear anything on traffic tonight if we can.
Okay. Well, and I know that
agreed.
So standard is to continue with what Mr. Hyatt's doing and have him come back next time. But since we've only got 4, I think I'd like to hear from this time. Mr. Hyatt, do you have a problem with that?
So if once we conclude Mr. Pelusi, we would have 3 more witnesses: architect, traffic, and land planner, and put them on next meeting. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, not unless we can, not unless these commenters are only 15 minutes. We might get to one of them at least tonight of your witnesses. But yes, that is kind of what I'm suggesting, unless we get to one of them tonight.
No, that's fine.
All right. Well, how about then we finish? So another 10 minutes to finish up this, and then we go to those 4 people that are waiting. Is that going to be another 10 minutes of this presentation?
Or less. We're just about done.
Okay. Well, so Julian, if you could let those people know, and if you're listening on, well, obviously those people should be listening. We'll go another 10 minutes or so with Mr. Hyatt's presentation right now, and then we'll take a break to take some public comment from those people that are still online in another 10 to 15 minutes. So Mr. Hyatt, please continue.
Okay. Mr. Pelusi, any other comments on section E?
No, this is the last 2 sections. This is illustrating the relationships on the Cottage Road, where we have front-loaded garages in the bottom left illustration. So this closes out our presentation. I appreciate the time and the open dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pelusi. That would conclude my questioning of this witness, Mr. Chairman, at this time. And we will discuss, just to respond to some of the questioning, we will discuss amongst ourselves regarding the width, the lane width. I mean, you raised some good points. We've discussed that here. We don't have a problem reducing the widths. We do need to have a little bit of coordination again with the Department of Public Works, and we'll try to do that between now and the next time we meet, because you raised some good points, and we'll go ahead and do that.
Well, that's one commissioner's view. I don't know about the rest of the commissioners and myself. I mean, I like bigger lanes. Gives me more of a buffer if I was riding my bike, but we could hear more about that on the option, I guess.
I tend to agree with Alex.
Okay.
Yeah, I just tend to agree with him. I think my experience is the same as his. When the lanes are narrower, cars go slower and it's safer. And if they're slower, it's safer for the bicyclists also. So I'm trying to figure out some way to get leverage with DPW. So that's where I'm coming from.
And if you take this, I mean, you already got a design, and I guess if it's easier and don't have to change the design, just give the footage over to the bike lane. But maybe Alex is right. Yeah, it does open up the view of the driver.
Or a center median of 4 feet. I mean, Mr. Pelusi Mr. Johnson can come up with some really nice ideas if they have the room.
The main problem with the center median, which I don't think would be acceptable, is that for the fire trucks, they really do require a minimum of 20 feet access. And we've run into many difficulties with fire departments on not having adequate lane width for them in an emergency situation. So while I do think that we can shave the lane widths down, I don't think that going less than 20 feet as a clear distance would be acceptable to fire.
Okay, you'll
Yeah,
report
or
to
eight,
us.
eight, 8 foot sidewalks is terrific too. Take 2
Yeah.
feet, put it to the sidewalk. Never
thought
can
you'd
have a
go with
wide
the
enough
bike
to
lane.
sidewalk.
I thought you'd be pushing the bike lane more, getting bigger. Why not make the bike
Yeah, but
lane bigger, Alex?
the thing with the bike lane is all you'd be doing is moving the position of a piece of paint, which,
True.
paint is just paint. And while a line in the road plays a very minor trick on your eye, it doesn't really do much.
Can we
So
talk about this next time after there's been?
Yeah, good point.
sure.
Sure, okay. And yeah, is it really safer to do that or not? Will it really calm things down? All those questions from the traffic engineer, I guess we could ask in the next briefing.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman,
okay.
is it possible for you to request, or perhaps Mr. Smith to request a representative from the Department of Public Works to attend?
We should to answer those questions. That would definitely help. Is David Jarrell still on for the city management? Can forward that request, or planning and zoning would, obviously. Tom?
I'm happy to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I would like to request, well, maybe more than whatever's affecting that, our city traffic engineer maybe, as well as anyone else who could have an all-encompassing answer. What do you think?
I think it's helpful to understand the public works perspective on lane widths and maintenance and snow plowing and their reasons. I also like to remind the commission that as a planned development, you have the authority to narrow road widths and right-of-way widths within a planned development.
Could you, for the next hearing, provide us with that code section?
I will provide that code section, Commissioner.
All right,
Walton.
and we're going to have the traffic briefing on the next meeting, so maybe we can get our city traffic engineer to participate in that.
Very good.
Anybody else, commissioners, you want to invite? All right, excellent. All right, well, Mr. Hyatt, thank you. We'll take a pause for your presentation and exit into public comment. And Julian, I'd like to get the first person available that you have that would talk for a large organization in the city, whoever the largest organization that you have ready to testify tonight.
In all honesty, I'm not entirely sure. I have Laura Townsend here. I thought we'd start with her though.
And Laura, well, okay, Laura, do you represent a big organization, or are you just representing as yourself as an individual?
Okay, I am the vice president of the Crab Creek Conservancy.
Okay, perfect. So if you could state.
And I would just like to state for the record as a.
Hold on, hello?
Yeah.
Ms. Townsend? Okay,
Yeah.
so if you're representing the Crab Creek Conservancy, fantastic. So we'll go ahead, and since you're representing a large organization, like to give you a 10-minute time frame to brief when you start, and hopefully that works for you. If it doesn't, we'll go a little further past that. And then the commissioners will ask you questions if need be. And also, could you state your name, full name, address, and who you represent, your address where you live, and then we'll go from there, and you can have the floor.
Yes, hi. I appreciate that. I would like to state for the record that I think 15 minutes is inadequate after about 5+ hours of testimony on behalf of the applicant. But my name is Laura Townsend, and I do represent both myself and Crab Creek Conservancy as vice president. And I will begin my comments.
And what's your address, please? We need that for the record.
I would rather give that off the record for security reasons.
This is a public environment.
I understand that. Have all the applicants disclosed their home addresses?
All the applicant has given us that information, but if you'd like to do it off the line to Julian, could you just text him that in the side text, please?
I will do that.
And let me know when you get it, Julian, but you can proceed as well.
I don't have a way to text Julian.
Laura, I have your number here. I'll text you.
Okay.
Do you live within the city limits, Ms. Townsend?
I have resided in the city limits for years in the past. I live in the county adjacent to Forest Drive.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. Want to say Happy New Year, and as I've followed the comments here tonight, I have noticed how informed members of the commission are with the area we are talking about, and I want to commend you for that. I am the Vice President of Crab Creek Conservancy, but I'm also speaking here as a member of the public who would be grossly impacted because I live along Forest Drive. I've opposed this project since I ran for City Council in 2005. And while some have stated there's no opposition to the project, there is very lively opposition, which has kept it at bay for 16 years now. I've submitted previous lengthy comments in writing to the commission and on the forest conservation plan. And because of that, I'm going to give an overview and hope you've read the other comments. The 4 minutes initially allotted to us are not sufficient to delve into the science and facts that support our assertions, and not even an hour would be. It would be better if we could have the time in parity with what the developers have had. The assertion earlier that nothing can be done on this site without felling trees is patently untrue. It could be a park. The fact is that these folks have a financial interest in convincing you that development is the only option. I'll divulge later why I think that is not true. Also, the space is not comparable to others within the city, and that none of them have the size and scope of this forest or the ecosystem. So comparison to other variances that have been granted or are under review is not a fair assessment. I'm going to focus my comments on 4 points: the environmental impact, environmental equity and justice, adherence to Annapolis city law, and fiscal considerations. On my first point, I'd like to state that as outlined in my written comments, there is no way building such an entity will not irreparably harm the environment in the area. The mitigation developers have proposed is cheap and dirty to convince members of the public that window dressing efforts will ameliorate tremendous destruction of a habitat that currently provides clean air, clean water, cooling, and a vibrant environment for untold biological catalysts. You cannot replace mature legacy trees with saplings and get the same result. And I've heard a ludicrous assertion from a developer that will transplant mature trees, and had a 30-year staff member of the U.S. Forest Service tell me it's impossible given the mortality rate, which would be almost 100%. The addition of the impervious surface will also tremendously change an ecological system adjacent to the waterways that run directly into the bay, the world's largest estuary. The stormwater solutions they propose are inadequate to the overall deviation from the in situ natural process that already exists and works well. My last point on the environmental side of the equation is that the traffic introduced to an already failing system will not only be an inconvenience to everyone who lives here, but will set off a cavalcade of repercussions in terms of pollution and other harms. I previously submitted documentation that shows through scientific analysis that when you add lanes and introduce new connector roads, they do not reduce or even substantially handle the increase in traffic. Every single study supports the concept of induced traffic demand, which says you increase the load of the road. While I believe the forest matters, even without that concern, this development is unsuitable for the Forest Drive corridor because of the increased unsustainable traffic that will be added. For my second consideration, I want to go on the record that I believe this development is not racially equitable. This development will sit beside two communities that are both homes to the economically disadvantaged and peoples of color. Those residents are primary stakeholders in actions affecting the immediate area, and yet it seems little has been done to take their needs and considerations into account. Leveling the nearby forest will result in increased air temperatures and loss of air quality to those residents. The proposed new feeder road, the extension of Skipper's Lane, which will go through their neighborhoods to allow traffic to flow to the affluent development next door, will exponentially increase the traffic passing by their homes with the addition of not just passenger vehicles, but commercial vehicles in this space where they maintain their daily lives and their children play. It's my belief these folks have been ignored because they are people in color, and because in one respect, as HACA residents, they are tenants of the city. It is also worth noting that Alan Hyatt is the lawyer for the property management company for one of those communities, Woodside Gardens, and the Hampstead companies, and also has worked as a lawyer representing HACA. For too long, developers and governments have planned and conspired and constructed developments near minority communities without their consent or consideration. My third point, adherence to Annapolis city law, hews closely to my equity and justice argument. Annapolis has an ordinance entitled the Moderately Priced Dwelling Unit Ordinance, or MPDU. whose sole purpose is to ensure that for every development catering to the more prosperous, citizens with less economic means are included through a provision that states 15% of the development has to be set aside. The aforesaid moderately priced dwelling units. And real equity means that developers cannot be allowed to buy their way out of that law. I've read the ordinance. I've had lawyers read the ordinance. I've consulted 2 former city council members and a former mayor. There is nothing about that ordinance that exempts the proposed project from the need to comply. I've asked current city officials, and the answer I get is that it doesn't have to comply because it's an institution. There is nothing in the ordinance that exempts institutions or even defines that term. It's not my problem if the developers didn't foresee this and if they don't like it. The law was passed to ensure that the city of Annapolis retains the vitality that a diverse population instead of becoming another Hamptons. This project has to comply with the ordinance. The fact that it's a nonprofit or institution does not exempt it the way the law is worded. If you read the promotional materials for the proposed Providence Point and use their financial calculators to find out what you can afford there, you will find that this development is intended for the most affluent of the affluent. A 1-bedroom apartment starts at $325,000. Monthly fees start at just over $3,000. Other buy-in fees of up to $1 million apply. They don't want to comply with the ordinance because they don't want to give up the revenue. They want to market this development to the mainly rich white people they're familiar with because those are people like them. This is one of the reasons why, in my opinion, the development does not want to cede public access to the trailways through the facility, as was mentioned in the last session of this hearing. Pathways that will wind through the little bit of forest the developers were allowed to stand, because public access means those brown and black people next door will be walking through their nice new costly facility. I want it on the record that this development has to be held to the MPDU ordinance standard, but I suspect the issue will end up in court. My last point deals with fiscal considerations. The financial mitigations that developers have laid out here are not commensurate with the city's future need to maintain all that would be needed to accommodate this facility. Not the roads, not the stormwater management infrastructure, not the demand and stresses on city and public services like fire and ambulance. In part, this is because the facility is structured as a nonprofit, and nonprofits don't pay taxes. On the other side of the equation, it might not be well known, and I was told this by a friend of mine who was a former city council member that worked for Medicare. Residents of such facilities can deduct the cost of the facility from their federal taxes, which filters down to their state taxes, which means these folks in this facility will be paying a lot less in income taxes percentage-wise than the residents next door. These types of senior housing are losing money and closing nationwide right now because of COVID. Other information I will forward shows that Annapolis is already saturated with senior housing options. We do not need a white elephant that will destroy the land and might ultimately close under a mountain of debt. It's kind of sad, but today is a historic day. All day I spent thinking about how a bunch of idiots tried to co-opt our democracy a year ago because they thought they were right. Tonight I see a parallel on a micro scale. We have a bunch of developers who want to co-opt our city and cause a tremendous amount of environmental and social harm just because they want to make money and because they think they are right. They are wrong, and I hope you read the tremendous amount of material that's been forwarded to you and will be forwarded to you after this that shows the science and reasons why this development should not be built. It's also shameful that concerned citizens have to grovel for equal time, which we haven't gotten yet, and involve the power of the press, while laws, rules, and procedures are changed gratuitously for out-of-town developers and expensive lawyers. Lastly, because the boss once told me not to point out the problems unless I had a solution, I'll add this. I spoke with former Mayor Mike Panelides the other day, and we discussed the numerous options the city has to acquire this land and preserve it, and the fact with open space monies and other state grants the city already has, we could spend as much as $24 million to acquire it right now. So that belies the statements we've heard before that there's no use for this land unless they knock down all the trees and build on it. But there's this issue that everyone seems entitled, and it's a foregone conclusion that this land will be developed. Zoning changes are a privilege, not a right. And the city code states that they have to be a powerful benefit to the city and other residents in order to be granted. And this is not. The smart choice here is not to let the developers take over our city like Trumpians. The smart choice is to take steps to preserve this pristine land so it can continue to provide the beneficial ecological input that make life better for everyone here. And because I've been limited in time, I apologize for my rush comments, and I will finish there and submit my science and documentation later.
Take another 5 to 7 if you want. We've got time. Keep going.
Well, I already edited my comments down to that at the moment because I was actually told I only had 4 minutes.
Okay, if you'd like, the next time we meet, you can actually file again online to talk, and we'd let you talk the next time as well. And you can talk for a little longer if you'd like. Gladly give you another 15 minutes next time if you'd like.
I appreciate that, and so will some of the other folks that I know of that would like to speak.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Townsend. We really appreciate it. Sorry it's abbreviated there, but a lot of good information. And hopefully you can come back and talk to us again next week and elaborate some more. And being the fact it's almost 10 o'clock, we'd like to, rather than having comments back, we'd like to get to some more of the public testimony. So if we could get the next person on, and thanks again, Ms. Townsend. Who's next? And Ms. Townsend, again, public is from the Crab Creek Conservancy. And next member we have, and who do you represent and where do you live?
Next, we have Christine Dunham, Mr. Chair.
All right, Christine Dunn, address please, in the city, out of the city. Christine Dunn, you're still muted, and maybe that's from our end.
No.
Julian, can you unmute Christine, please?
Okay, have you
There she
unmuted?
is.
Okay.
All right.
20
Address,
years,
please.
20 years, Eastport, Annapolis Neck, most recently 18 Silverwood Circle, and
Perfect.
now 251 Admiral Cochrane Drive.
All right, and if you represent an organization, let us know. If not, please continue.
I'm just representing myself as a member of the public. As a longtime Annapolis Neck resident, I would like to register my opposition to this development and to ask that it not be approved. While I certainly appreciate the efforts to reduce the size and scope of the project and the efforts to be more sensitive, developing on a green field, in this case, a mature priority forest, no matter how sensitively done, as opposed to an existing gray field with existing infrastructure, is very disappointing and confounding at best. There are underutilized gray field parcels within the city boundaries with existing impervious surface and infrastructure, and apparently on this specific site, that would be more appropriate to house such a project, and then would be a true example of smart growth and ripe for economic redevelopment. Despite the improvements, there are still a number of objections and unanswered questions related to this project. For example, it is unclear as a member of the public why the development is not fronting the road where the forest is typically more degraded in order to minimize forest fragmentation, or is not making use of the existing impervious surface footprint already fronting the road. It was stated that it would be an unwarranted burden or hardship to not develop on a priority forest while discounting the ecosystem service benefits that will be lost forever. Also, Annapolis wants to become a leader in climate resiliency. It cannot do that by fragmenting the last forests on the absurdly named Forest Drive, or more appropriately named Deforested Drive. If the city truly wants to be a leader in sustainability, to be a more equitable city, and to attract more young people, I ask you to please reconsider this project and to work with the developer to move this project to a gray field area with existing infrastructure that is in need of investment. Please help our city become a leader in a sustainable and climate resilient growth. Our future depends on it. This is the last forest on Forest Drive. Please save it. What is lost can never be replaced. Thank you for your consideration of an alternative to this project. Thank you.
Ms. Dunham, thank you very much. That was very concise and to the point. And I like the analogy there about Forest Drive, or not even an analogy, the equipment about Forest Drive. That's a good one. Okay, and Ms. Dunham, again, if you need to add some more at the next meeting, you can gladly apply again to speak. On to the next person that we have from the public to speak.
Next, we have Valerie Casasanto?
Ms. Casasanto, your address in the city, out of the city, and then you can continue, please.
Yes, thank you. My address is 980 Awald Road, off of Edgewater Drive.
Thank you.
And as a longtime citizen of Annapolis, I'm very much opposed to this mega development. If approved, it would be a disaster for the environment, the bay, the wildlife, the city of Annapolis, and to us as citizens. Currently, this is a productive priority forest, mitigating climate change right now by soaking up our excess carbon, keeping us cool, providing cover and food for wildlife, and cleaning our runoff before going into the bay. Destroying this forest and replanting trees, even if they're native trees, is like cutting out someone's heart, waiting decades for a new one to grow back and replanting it in their body and trying to reanimate them back to life. In the meantime, it is dead and useless. The new development would be disturbing a miraculous working system and would be like taking the heart out of a healthy, productive individual, paving over productive land and vegetation, creating pollution, waste, pesticides, and runoff. Any replanted trees may or may not make it and may take decades to take hold and be productive. Even with the plans that you have noted that you're trying to implement, it may take decades. Also, the land and the trees around the development will suffer, and I don't have confidence that the developers or anyone will really take care of that, or that any buffers will really mitigate any effects around the surrounding areas, wetlands and forest. Although the proposed development was reduced in size and moved closer to Forest Drive, it is still a huge footprint with a lot of fragmentation and destruction of at least one wetland that I know of, and a huge negative impact on our area. Like I said, its effects will stretch out beyond any boundaries. People's trash, wastewater, pesticides, herbicides, etc. Not only will this development have a disastrous consequence for the environment, it will degrade our quality of life, greatly increasing traffic where we are already at our limits. We haven't even felt the impacts, traffic impacts of other developments coming down the pike, such as Reserve at Quiet Waters and a few other ones that are getting up and running now. Going through with it would be doing the opposite of what we should be doing, mitigating climate change. And if it's approved, it would show the city doesn't care about its citizens, wildlife, or about doing anything about climate change or for its own safety, as Forest Drive is one of the only pathways out of here if there's major a disaster or climate weather effects. And the city would be saying that it doesn't care about its stated goals of the Conservancy Board to protect the existing tree canopy. And it would also be going against its own goals in the comprehensive plan to increase the city's tree canopy to 50% of its total land area by 2036 and ensure a net gain of at least 1% each year to meet this goal. With Annapolis feverishly developing, it just needs to stop. We have no business decimating a productive forest for developments that are just after money and greed, and when we should be using the developed areas that are vacant, which there are plenty of, which Christine mentioned as well. So as a resident and very, very concerned citizen, I urge you to consider the big picture of this and this precious gem to our city, and not allow this development to go through. And I would like to make one more comment, and I do appreciate you allowing us to make public statements. It's been a very difficult process, and I feel like the whole process has been rigged against the average citizen. Very difficult. It was very difficult to find the hearing, to, fill out the forms, et cetera, to stay online for hours and hours and hours. And there's something wrong with that, when it makes it incredibly difficult for the average citizen to be able to speak out. So yeah, that's all I have for now. I appreciate the time that you did give me.
Thank you very much, Ms. Casasanto. And you can also come back again for our meeting where we were really planning on having the meat and potatoes of the public comment, which is the third round and maybe possibly the fourth, depending on how long it takes. Generally, the first and second rounds, which we're experiencing right now, are for to get the presentation out there so we can all digest it. So as far as looking at how it flows, the presenter presents it, we ask questions of the presenter, and then we have public comment at the end, which would have been that third and fourth meeting possibly. So that's where you're seeing that delay, Ms. Casasanto. But since you were here tonight, we knew you were. We decided we'd make a hole in the normal flow and get you in. So thanks again. And over to Mr. Hyatt and the gang. She brought up a good point about the herbicides and things like that. So if we could get in the future in the next continued briefing about maintenance of the property and what kind of eco-friendly methods may they be involved if they were going to be approved and have to maintain the property. So I'd like to hear more about that at the next meeting. So that's a good point brought by. And also we'll give the applicant some time to respond to some of these points that were made tonight by the public testimony. And there is one more public testimony person, I believe. Is that correct, Julian?
Yes, sir. Jim Urban.
Jim Urban, who is former director of planning and zoning, I believe, or
former commissioner.
Former commissioner. There you go. So let's hear from Jim Urban now. Glad to have you back. You want a job?
All right. Thank you. Am I coming through? I think I am.
Yes, you are.
So
please give your background and address to be.
Okay. Thank you. My name is James Urban. I live at 915 Creek Drive in Annapolis, good old Eastport, 21403.
Republic thereof.
I am as was mentioned, I'm a former planning commissioner. I'm also a landscape architect, which I guess this will be my unveiling that I guess I'm considering myself emeritus now because I'm fully retired and so I've let my license in Maryland lapse. So I'm just a private citizen, but I have 40 or 45 years of professional background in the field of landscape architecture. I'm going to keep my comments as brief as possible. I've submitted about 5 pages of comments in addition to the short piece I wrote on the Forest Conservation Plan.
And we received that. We received all the comments that we were sent in, that everybody mentioned previously.
And I hope you'll find them well enough written so that you can understand what my thoughts are. In general, I spent most of the time on this project looking at the Forest Conservation Plan. I worked with Gerald Weingrad and his group trying to understand the plan and how it might be improved. And I must say that throughout that process, the developer was very good about responding to the comments that we made. I've walked the site about 3 or 4 times. And I think I have a pretty good understanding of the site. So I endorse the Forest Conservation Plan. There are a few things on there that still need to be resolved, but we're early in the process. There'll be a final plan, which I hope some of my comments can be resolved. Since the last hearing, I've spent more time looking at the landscape drawings. And while they are a good set of plans, the big missing piece is the soil. While there's soil talked about for the planting of trees, there's no discussion about what's happening on the soil for supporting really large trees on this site. So the details all imply that there's one kind of material undefined around each tree that's planted in the landscape, and we don't really know what that material is. I've been advocating for a long time, probably 30 years, that a planting plan should be should include a soils plan that shows each area and what the soil will, how that soil will be treated to support the plants that are within it. And this is a fairly simple document to prepare. And I've given quite a bit of technical information to the commission on the things that need to be included in that. Finally, I find these presentations to be very informative. I learn something every time. I already have a page of notes from tonight that I will transfer into notes to you all before your next meeting. And I appreciate the good work that the commission does. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Urban. And as stated earlier, Mr. Urban was previously on this commission and has some very useful credentials and experience. Any questions by the commissioners of Mr. Urban or or questions about or things you want to hear from the rest of the public testimony personnel this evening that we follow up with?
I only want to say that I'm having trouble taking Mr. Urban's detailed comments and turning them into conditions that make sense. He might work on that between now and the 20th of January.
Yeah, well, actually, I hope that I wrote them. They're not as succinct as they need to be for a condition. But I think they could be paraphrased to a condition that somebody like Tom Smith and the other wonderful people we have on staff to turn into the right documentations, and I'd be glad to work with you on that.
Yeah. Have you conveyed these 5 pages of notes to the applicant?
No, I sent them to Tom Smith, and I assume the proper protocol is that he would convey them to the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct.
I saw in some of your notes also you commented about the 12-foot lane width. So not to beat a dead horse here, but do you have anything different to add than what I've said?
Well, yeah, I totally agree that we should make lanes narrower. There's actually I'll have to dig deep into my files, but there is from the 1990s, there was a very good study that done by real traffic engineers for real traffic associations that basically says that for every foot you decrease the lane width from 12 feet, accidents increased until you got to 9 feet and then it leveled off. The other, in one of my discussions with previous director of public works, about this very issue for a bike lane that was being discussed on Bay Ridge Avenue. I was riding my bicycle one day up Ridgely Avenue, and I was sort of looking down, as you do, down at the pavement. I said, damn, this is one of the main entrances in this city, and this is a really narrow lane. So I got off my bike and I measured the lane, and it was 8 feet. And so you can support an awful lot of infrastructure with much narrower lanes.
And you also, one of the first comments you made has to do with a civil drawing, C-105. There's a line of inlets designed to pick up stormwater from the south and west edge of the tree save area. And you're suggesting that they be moved to the front of the cottages, is that correct?
No, the inlets need to be where they are. They're a correct engineering decision. What I was questioning was, in some cases, the pipe connects across the back of the unit, so it moves the excavation and resulting root damage closer to the tree save area. So if you, in some instances, the engineer has plumbed them by running the inlet, the pipes down between the units and connecting them along the front. Other places, they connect them across the back. And I would like to see if it could be done to connect them, to have the inlet stay where it is, but the pipes all run between the units and then be connected across the front to get to the inlet. The amount of pipe run is a little bit longer, but not, I mean, it's not double.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Okay. All right.
Any more
Okay.
questions?
Wow.
All right. I have a question, Mr. Hyatt. Were you able to ever meet with, or have you met with the Crab Creek Conservancy on this application?
I have not. I'll have to find out who in our group has, if they have, and I'm not familiar with the Crab Creek Conservancy. So, you know, you mentioned they're a large group. I don't know if they're a large group or not. I'm not
You know,
sure.
I don't know that as well.
Yeah.
I mentioned that. It just sounded like it in the emails. I can't say whether they're a large group, but they are a group that has fed us quite a significant amount of information. But you have not met with them.
I have not met with them. No.
Okay. And the anybody from the development team, you don't know yet.
I don't know, but we will discuss that.
Alan, this is Larry. We have not met with them.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Julian, anyone else? I don't believe we have anyone else for testimony, correct?
No, sir, that is everyone.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Hyatt and the rest of the gang for letting me get those people in. I think it's a good thing. Get them in and get some of the other side of the story, because we didn't get that from Mr. Weingrad. But okay, we do have some other stuff to take care of, so I'd like to continue this item to the next meeting. The public testimony is still open, so members of the public, you can submit testimony online as well as to testify at the next meeting, because we will really start going into the chunk of public testimony.
I can't hear you.
I can't hear Ben.
It's like your mic went off.
We do have to do election of officer. Is there any other comments with that item before we move on to our next item on the agenda? Last minutes, Mr. Hyatt.
I didn't hear what you said.
You were muted.
Lost audio.
And you cut out for a while.
A proxy setting window came up on my screen, so I'll just make it short again. We do have to move on to election of officers. So
Nope, lost him again.
Mandatory reboot.
I think he's gone now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is gone.
There he comes back.
all right, I'm back. My computer popped me in and out. Sorry.
Yeah, right.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Let's move on to, are there any last minutes, Mr. Hyatt or commissioners for the item concerning?
Mr. Chairman, I would just say if we can start at 7 p.m. on the 20th, then, you know, I'll have my three witnesses go through their presentations, and I can conclude our case in chief in probably,
right,
as I say, about an hour and a half would be my goal, hour and a half to 2 hours tops.
That sounds fantastic. Then we can go into public testimony, but I believe we also might have another thing trying to get on the agenda. I hope not for that meeting, but we'll keep you at the priority. But if it's a small item, we might squeeze it in before you. Yeah, I know. But I don't think there is. Tom, is there something? Because I don't want to squeeze anything, but I could swear somebody tried, right?
Perhaps after us.
There is another item on the agenda, Mr.
Already?
Chairman. It's not a small item. It's a site design.
Then that's not going before these guys, in my opinion. Tom, do you agree?
I think that's March.
I think the discussion we had previously, Mr. Chairman, was that if we
no.
concluded with the Village of Providence Point, we would then hear that item.
Yeah, I remember texting you a one word no. So to be fair, and they're spending a lot of money. We'll continue with Providence Point first.
And I didn't mean any disrespect, Mr. Chairman, but I did add it to the agenda.
Yeah, well, yeah, rightly so, because I won't be chairman soon. I don't think in another few minutes. Okay. Well, we'll proceed with Providence Point first, in my opinion, and then we'll see what happens when this chairmanship changes, and maybe in a few minutes. Okay, we'll continue that item and on to election of officers. Thank you, Mr. Hyatt, and everyone else. Members of the public, thank you for dialing and staying in so late with us. Members of the public, it's huge. And this is where you do it. This is for you. Commissioners, we do have the matter of election of officers, and Diane is not here tonight. Would you like to do that tonight, as is our standard procedure, the first meeting of the year, or would you like to continue it? It has been continued in the past before. So
may I make a suggestion?
Sure, go right ahead.
There's nothing in our rules that requires us to do something on the first meeting in January. And Ms.
election of officers,
Diane Butler's not here. And the other thing is, just to give, we're moving along quite well with this very complicated application. And I would suggest that we not have election of officers until that case, until there's been a vote made on the village at Providence Point. I know, keeps you on the hot seat, but you're doing it, well, what can I say?
I'd also your opinion matters more than most everybody else.
You're doing good. You're just doing good. And I just feel like it's a good momentum, and maybe we ought to, discuss where we want to go next, but not tonight. We don't have to do it tonight. I think we should all be together.
You can continue it if you'd like. Anyone
Yeah,
else?
I agree with that. Having some continuity to get past this particular application is good.
Yeah, I think you're doing very good. I thought bringing in the citizens to comment tonight was a wonderful move. And you're right. We heard another point of view, and it was I think let's just keep going.
I also think
you're in the hot seat, big. Stay
in the tail on this donkey right here.
Okay.
I'd also like to get maybe a couple more people on our commission before we vote, anyways, too, just to have it.
Yeah,
not that any of them would be the chair right away, but I'm just saying.
I mean, good luck. I
don't know where that stands.
Right. Okay, I'm fine with that. I'll make you make a motion to continue. I move postpone it until a better day.
Continue the election of officers until the conclusion of the Village at Providence Point application.
Or 2025, whatever's
amended thereof.
In which case you'll move it to conclusion next meeting, I can tell.
Maybe. Yeah.
No, we're doing okay. No,
I think we're doing fine. It's not going to change much anyway.
Fine. I'm patient.
It's administrative role. Let's be honest. It's administrative role, and we're all equally a vote here. So
yeah, I think I'm very happy.
Okay. All right. There's been a motion.
I think you've come up. No, I think I'm very happy with it. Good ideas, and there's going to get done in the next 2 weeks, and we're going to get some answers.
That's right.
I do want one of the things that Smith's going to give us is our powers under the plan development section. I would suggest, it's not long, but I would suggest you take a look at them because, take a look.
We'll get that as a first item, I think.
I'd also like to understand the MPDU process better too, and see if really, is there anything that precludes these institutions from being part of that? And I know that what might preclude them is the fact that, yeah, they might be able to buy these things, but can they pay for the $3,000 a month? I don't know if there's anything that actually precludes that.
Can I rely upon you to get the answers to that?
Well, that's what Tom Smith's on the phone for, to ask, but I'll ask him.
Well, there's a woman who does MPDUs in the planning office, right?
Yeah. Well, hold on a quick second. Can we get the vote on the postponement done first? We had a motion to postpone the elections, and I'll second that motion. Any further discussion? All right, the motion to postpone the election of officers till a meeting time to be determined in the future, most likely after Providence Point has been pinned on this donkey. Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, fantastic. I think it's very fair, and then Diane can be here when it happens.
And maybe
okay,
we can amend that to be maybe or 2025, whatever's later.
So,
It's 12 nights, for God's sake.
Mr. Smith, Tom Smith,
Yes, sir.
where can we go to get answers to the MPDU situation? Who could brief us on that?
Oh, most likely staff.
Okay.
And we did raise this concern with the Office of Law, and they concurred with staff that MPDUs are for residential dwelling units, and an institution for the care of the aged does not meet that definition. It's a continuing care retirement community in this instance, regulated by the Maryland Department of Aging, and you're actually only buying services. You don't buy a unit. I think
Right. That was talked about in the last meeting, is that there's no title transfer here. And so when somebody goes to live there in one of these cottages, they don't actually own it. They're essentially, it's a complicated form of rental. There's no title transfer. So I don't know how within the MPDU language that would happen.
It's like a secure bond or something almost.
Well,
or-
it's apples and oranges. I mean,
I think the public, since it was raised, and I can only assume that person will continue to watch, as outraged as as committed as they sounded. I think that they're owed a bit of an explanation. It doesn't need to be a lot, but maybe Tom, you could do that bit of explanation as to why MPDUs simply do not apply here.
I'm happy to provide the commission and the members of the public with that.
Another thing that I'm going to be interested in, I'd really like to see, are the details on the path along Forest Drive. And I would like to see whatever details you have on the Skipper's Lane extension westward.
By details, Commissioner Wallman?
Well, there was a long and forceful comment that was provided, public comment that was provided by Trudy McFall.
Yes.
And I think that it would be important at this point to see what sketches have been done. What does it look like, that extension to?
I'm not sure that extension has been designed at this point. It's been designed preliminarily from a vertical standpoint and a horizontal alignment standpoint. But as far as what the section of the roadway looks like there is typically, as we've seen with this project, as the landscape changes or the environment changes, the road section changes. And what might be suggested there is that there be perhaps no sidewalk or no on-street parking there adjacent to the Glen, so you can maximize the amount of buffer.
Well, you definitely want a sidewalk because you want a way for middle school kids to walk to middle school.
Well, you can have sidewalks. That's not really where I was going. My point being was we want to maximize the amount of buffering there, and maybe there needs to be fencing. Maybe there needs to be thought in that direction given to that section of the road.
Okay.
We have other sections within the city that have this similar scenario.
Okay.
Well, I found the comments that the extension of Skipper's Lane by Homes on the Glen, Woodside Gardens, and Newtown 20 to be a negative thing. I find that argument mildly incoherent because the folks that live in those three developments are basically sort of pinned in, and that's been one of the real detriments to that location, is that there's one way in, one way out, and there's not a lot of there's not a lot of options there, and having Skipper's Lane go by there and through Village of Providence Point out benefits everybody. I mean, that's the thing about road grid networks, is they benefit everybody, not just one person. So I find that argument that it's going to be negative on those residents to be just incoherent.
Well, we're getting ahead of our game, but just
That's
remember
true.
that in the longest run, it's gonna swerve through, connect with Gemini Road, and be a straight shot to the rec center. That's gonna be, that's where it goes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's fair to ask for some information on that, given the public comment that was received.
Sure.
So just letting you know, Mr. Smith. You know, an aerial, a sketch, something about what state the planning of it is and what do you got to work with there? Just, we've got to answer some of this.
Well, Commissioner, we know it's supposed to be a 60-foot right of way, but it's historically been up to each development project, which you're going to see for that parcel soon, called the Willows. It's in a very conceptual stage. I've had community meetings, and perhaps it's us to give them some direction.
Right, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. So just flash something up there. Good, great. All right, anything? David Iams, you look like you're done here.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, you want to go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and then any other things we want to give to Tom or Jackie for the next meeting?
No, I thought it went very well.
All right.
I moved to adjourn with thanks to our chairman for really running a smooth show.
Well, thank you, everyone, for pinning the tail on this donkey for this development for a few more meetings. And I've enjoyed it with you guys for the last 2 years. And it is 12th night for Carnival season tonight. So the Epiphany. So everyone, I want to let you know, Carnival starts tonight for everyone for the next 2 months. Yeah, that's right. I'm on it, and I've got a king cake, and I'm ready to start partying after I get off this phone call.
All right, do I have a second?
Go ahead.
Yes,
I'll second it. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, members of the public, for staying on so late.